Good evening, everyone, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another edition of Pox Populi and Friends. Tonight, I'm going to be joined by Hwitgeard, Tyr, and next Jeelvy. So we've got some frequent guests of the show. We've got Tyr, who I spoke with, I think, in February. Very interesting fellow, the Germanic Canadian farmer in the hills of Switzerland. And of course, you all should know Nix and Hwitgeard by now. But I will let them each give a little introduction, tell us what they've been up to in the community and also just in life in general, if they are so willing to indulge us. So let's start with you, Hwitgeard. How have you been? What have you been up to?
I'm not too bad. I've just been busy with work. Last week, a friend and I went to perform a ritual and offerings to Eostra. So that was good to finally start to move my heathen practices out from the individual and take part with other people and hopefully start to roll that forward a bit more and get more people involved and build up more of a community in that sort of endeavour. So I'm quite pleased with that. Other than that, yeah, just usual things really. Nothing new from me personally at the moment.
Sounds like a much better way than I spent Easter week. I won't get into it, but I was working quite a lot. It's Semana Santa here in Spain is just a crazy time. And really, more than anything, it's an excuse to just have a big party. Apart from the religious processions with the floats and everything, it's become something quite secular, quite almost like I would say, I think St. Patrick's Day in Ireland. It's an excuse for a big piss up.
Yeah.
And I helped a friend of mine who owns a tavern. So I was an extra pair of hands for him, and just the amount of work that has to be done, giving all these people their alcohol, was pretty intense. All right, Nix, how about you? How have you been?
Well, as you guys may have heard, right here in the land of the Orthodox, we're a little behind the times. So today is Good Friday for me, right? And Easter does not come until Sunday. And yeah, I've been doing fine. I've been organizing shows. I've been running this. It's in jest a championship of epic war crime music on my Telegram channel where people vote on their favorite song from the Yugoslav wars, and I've been doing that mostly. So, working on morale, making sure we do not become the anti-fun movement. I think I mentioned this last time. There's a serious risk of us becoming just humorless scolds. I'm always working on a couple of things in the background, maybe publishing some very interesting things uh, in the coming future. So that's what I've been up to.
All right, very good, very good. Just want to check on Odyssey. Looks like we had some problems getting the stream up. Yeah, it's looks like it's buffering. That's what I've been getting this whole time too, just constant buffering. I've tried resetting the stream already on a couple of occasions. Uh, don't really know what the solution to that will be. It just keeps buffering. So, if you want to tune in on YouTube, we are streaming there as well. Looks like it's okay. I see Dino Legovic has said that we're back on Odyssey, so that's good. Okay, so hopefully that will continue for the rest of the stream. I think it's going good now. All right, fantastic. So let me get to our last, but certainly not least, guest tonight, and of course, it is Tyr who inspired this Pox Populi and Friends edition. So, Tyr, how have you been? What have you been up to? How's the homestead? How's the farm?
Today was a good day. Work's been nice and steady, not too much, and so that gave me today. I had the whole day basically to do stuff. So I had to move my sheep, put them onto fresh pasture. I had to clean out my chickens and my rabbits. We have 6 baby rabbits right now, so we're gonna they're probably gonna be weaned in about 2 weeks, and then I got to get them to these cages that they're like tractors that I move across the grass, across the pasture, so that they eat the pasture and they grow out. And I'll probably be slaughtering those in September. They'll probably be ready then. Yeah, no, it's things are good. Weather's been good. Everything's pretty relaxed for the most part. We just had Easter break, so we had 2 weeks no school, so the kids were home, which is I always prefer that. I like when the family is all under the roof together. So yeah, it's been really, really good, and I'm excited for this conversation. This is my first time sitting with Hwitgeard, and so it'll be very cool to chat with him a bit. And I'm excited to bring forth my ideas here that I wrote that I wanted to kind of I hope that together we can actually flesh it out a little bit and make more sense, because a lot of it was just off the cuff. I was just throwing out ideas on things that I think they're getting too cloudy, they're getting too gray, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining our standards and pursuing our end goals. So yeah, I'm excited to do this conversation.
All right, very good. Yeah, I think it'll be a good one. So let me just say then, to sort of set everything up for the audience tonight, that a few days ago on Tyr's Telegram, he made a post about the importance of knowing where you stand, that there are a lot of doubts going on these days. You know, it might not seem like it in the day to day, but we are living in pretty turbulent times, pretty momentous times. And so it's always good to have your feet on solid ground. And so you posted basically 7 things that for you are more or less, non-negotiable positions, that you could almost call them, your 7 fundamental principles. And so we saw this and we thought, you know what, this would be a pretty good conversation to have, because, like you said, it is worth fleshing out. And I think also as well, it's worth fleshing out, what are we for? And I think often our movement, our community, is very diagnostic and a little bit lacking in having any sort of vision. It's all well and good to identify problems, but every now and then it's also worth laying out what you're for. And so if you want to, Tyr, why don't you just read what you posted? It's your voice, so I'll throw it to you. You can just read it, and then we'll go from there discussing the various points that you mentioned.
Sure, here we go. Stating where you stand is often important for personal stability in chaotic times. I see many dubious ideas being pushed around. This is where I stand. Item number 1. Europe is for Europeans. No negotiations, no exceptions. Item number 2. China will not do anything good for us. If it does, it was by accident. Item number 3. Russia waging war on Europeans is bad for all Europeans. Item number 4. All our Western nations are illegitimate and there is no political solution. Item number 5. Technology will not fix collapsing demographics. It will continue to be used as a weapon that is a net negative in my eyes. Item number 6. The solution to everything is localism and decentralization during the current collapse. From this, new nation states will rise built off the principles of shared history, shared land, shared ideology, and most importantly, shared genetic heritage. Item number 7. Universalist religion is evil. If you are European and your religion is more important than your ethnicity, then we are not on the same team.
All right. So now in that post, I didn't read this in any giving any sort of particular importance chronologically or in any particular order of importance. For me, I just read it as 7 basic fundaments of Tyr. But did you put this in any order of importance, or is it sort of a random list?
So when I made the list, it was random because it was purely a reaction to a lot of things I was seeing in Telegram and on different social media platforms, where I was just going, man, we are losing the script. If I was to kind of edit it now and correctly assess what are my true principles, I would actually put one stays the same. Obviously, Europe is for Europeans. I would actually put number 4 as the second one, in that all are Western nations. And people got confused on this. I was more or less pointing at our governments, at our states, how they are organized, who's running them, how they are financed, lobbied, structured. They're all illegitimate. Their authority is illegitimate. And if you're going to look specifically at Germany, for example, it's pretty clear that their government has been illegitimate for a long time. So that would probably be number 2, is the legitimacy or the lack thereof in our Western nations. We're not being represented appropriately. I don't know if if the system itself, if this is the outcome of democracy, right? The rule by idiots and fools. But the reality is that we're going nowhere good with the people that are currently in control of our nations, because our nations do not represent the native peoples anymore. I would actually put number 7 as number 3, which is a universalist religion is evil. And this is something that's near and dear to my heart, because it was, for me, the Christianity that I was brought up in. And there's space. I'll always make space for the Christians that are able to maintain that they are prioritizing their ethnicity over everything else. But for me, that was one of the reasons why I was able to just say, I can't do Christianity anymore. It's got too many holes, and it demands my version, the one I grew up with, and the one that most commonly seems to be accepted by people, doesn't permit that priority. It prioritizes the afterlife, the metaphysical over the physical. So I can't roll with that. What you see and what you experience in this life, that should be your priority. That should be what you deal with. Then I would put in, so we're at 3. Then I would put in technology. So it's currently number 5. I would actually have it as number 4. And this is just how, I've been influenced by the Industrial Revolution and its Future by Uncle Ted. That book really blew my mind. His essay, his long essay. And then the solution should be at the bottom. So then it would be China and Russia would come in as 5 and 6, because they're kind of the current thing, right? The current chaos that's going on in the world. And then 7 would be my solution, what I believe is the go-to at this current time. Obviously, like anyone, I want to see a nation that represents my people, my identifiable group, linguistically and culturally and ethnically. But I don't see that. I don't see any government that actually defends the Germanic peoples, whether you look at Scandinavia, Great Britain, or any of the Germanic nations of the Netherlands, Germany, right? All of these were compromised. So that's kind of how I would reorganize the order of it. But yeah, you guys are now free to debate and tear it apart. Let's try and figure out what's good and what's not.
Well, then we'll start with what you would have substituted as number 2 if this was going in order of importance, because I think we all agree, I'm an ethno-nationalist. I assume that everyone in the chat agrees with the statement that Europe is and should be for the Europeans. Although I will say that I can make some caveats to that. Well, I guess no, because I got into a brief exchange with someone on Twitter about this who said that there should be absolutely no immigration whatsoever. Everyone should stay in their own homelands and their own countries, and that also goes for Europeans. So zero whatsoever intra-European immigration. And I responded saying that that's an absurd position and it's too extreme, and it will simply make our ideas seem absurd and impossible and unattractive. You have to be a bit realistic. And so I said also that the history of Europe is full of intra-European quote unquote immigration. It's always worth distinguishing this modern species of immigration from past movements of people, or some Italian artisans going to build a cathedral in France or something like that. So I wanted to make that caveat. I do think Europe is for the Europeans, and yeah, for the most part, every nation, every ethnic group should be the majority in their quote unquote country. But then, of course, a little bit of moving around, I think, is permissible. As far as non-European presence on the continent, well, the less the better. I think we all agree on that. So let's then dive into number 2, that all our Western nations, as far as like the nation state, the political entity, they are illegitimate, and there is no political solution. So I will let Nix give us his thoughts on this theme.
Yeah, so first let me just congratulate Tyr on really laying these 7 points out. I mean, I have minor disagreements with some of them, but this is actually a very good start. Like I said to you guys before we started streaming, when we were preparing this discussion, this is not quite a manifesto, but this could be a beginning of something that, yeah, people could put their names to and say, you want to learn about my ideology, here is this 7-point statement thereof. So it's very valuable, probably one of the most valuable things that has come out recently from this movement. And really shows you what new blood can do you, because it's you, me, you, Pox, me, Hwitgeard, we've been around for a while, but Tyr, you popped up recently. You decided recently to join as a public figure, as a content creator, and fresh set of eyes, fresh set of brains. This is what it can do. I want to congratulate you for laying it out so clearly. Now, as to the whole Western nations are legitimate and there is no political solution. The first thing that happened when I shared Tyr's 7-point statement of intent, let's call it that way, because a lot of my chat are Eastern Europeans. We're a little sensitive to this notion of an illegitimate nation, seeing how it is a propaganda point for Russian aggression, Russian imperialism. Oh, your nation is illegitimate. You're a fake nation. You're a fake this. You're a fake that. So I would change the wording to states are illegitimate to avoid confusion. I actually had to delete some posts in my chat because people were talking past each other and some unkind words were used, which were counterproductive. So that would be my addition to it. My second addition would be, I would like to state for the record that what we are proposing, right, which is a wholesale upending of the current order and its replacement with a completely different order, is fundamentally a political solution. as per Carl Schmitt. So we know from Carl Schmitt that the political does not really refer to moving commas around the tax code or whether we draw the line, in prohibiting sexual behavior at transgenders or at pedophiles or some other minor details like that. The political refers to the friend enemy distinction, and people throw that sentence around, the friend enemy distinction, but fundamentally Schmidt actually explains an enemy is someone whom you've been ordered by your government to kill. So this is fundamental. It refers to the state's power to declare war as an ultimate expression of sovereignty, right? So when we say political solution, we support transforming the sovereign in our lands. It's completely replacing the current political entities, which are the modern Western states. So, United Kingdom, Republic of France, Federal Republic of Germany, United States of America. We support dismantling these political structures and replacing them with a completely different political structure, which will have as its core mission the preservation of our race, the survival of our people, a future for white children. I think that actually the 14 words, some people consider them unoptical, but they are a fundamentally sound direction direction for our ideological activism, preserve the existence of our people and secure a future for white children. I don't remember them exactly. So this is like my teachable moment, I guess, here, where I point out, actually, we are the only ones with a political solution. Everything else is just apolitical. These guys, the other people, the liberal parties, the social democratic parties, the conservative parties, even the populist parties, they're not concerned with politics, right? They're concerned with within system details, which do not change the greater picture. The greater picture is that the current political order, because it is downstream of the decisions at Nuremberg, which criminalized white ethnic collectivism, can only fundamentally be anti-white because it prohibits whites from ethnically collectivizing while permitting it of every other race, permitting ethnic collectivization for every other race. Because we intend to upend and dismantle that political order, I would say, yeah, we are the real political solution, is what I'm trying to say here. But in the colloquial sense that we will not vote our way out of this, I will cautiously agree. Although we can use the parliamentary, political, electoral processes as a think of them as partisan activity, right? Guerrilla activity, not with the rifles in the mountains, but we can, insofar as our movement has the capital and ability to do so, stand up political options to work as spoiling attacks against different kinds of anti-white, anti-traditional measures, or we can engage in local politics, which is infinitely more practical, less ideological, so the barriers of entry for us could be lower. And of course, everyone has an interest in local politics. Fundamentally, cleaning up the neighborhood or putting up a stop sign where there isn't one is in everyone's best interest, even if you are, a political extremist, as we are often wrongly portrayed as. And so, yeah, I would caution that insofar as we engage in the political process, in the electoral process, we can actually gain something out of it. We cannot gain ultimate victory out of it, but something out of it, yeah, we can squeeze out of it.
Yeah, I would say that I've become increasingly unenamored of the phrase "there is no political solution," because the more I think about it, the more I've thought about it, you know, everything is political, really. Even sport, and especially nowadays, sport, entertainment, everything has become political. So why would the solution be excluded from that? And then, like you just said there at the end, local politics actually can be very influential and provide a very feasible pathway for people like us and for the things we want and the ideas that we want to implement. At the local level, it's quite possible, depending on which country you're talking about and which area of that country you find yourself in. And of late, I've been adding the word "now" to the end of that expression. There's no political solution now, because most of the people in politics, like Tyr mentioned at the start, they don't represent us at all. They, in fact, are quite antagonistic towards us, quite malevolent towards us. In many cases, they haven't even been elected. Not if you want to give that much power to the vote, but even if you exclude the vote as important, it still is a fact that people like Rishi Sunak, Humza Yousaf, they haven't been voted in. They were appointed by their political parties. So yeah, and then you get people like Giorgia Meloni in Italy, and you think, oh, that's a victory, that's a political victory, and yet I think, as has been said, the very structure of EU politics, Italian politics, global politics, is such that Fratelli d'Italia, Giorgia Meloni, couldn't do much, even if they were genuine, even if they had genuine intentions of doing as they promised. Although it's arguable that they don't have genuine intentions. In fact, it could be argued that they are truly grifters who ride a wave of nationalist sentiment into power, but then have no intention of fulfilling their promises. Because in fact, they live on the discontent of the nation. Without the immigration, invasion, would Fratelli d'Italia even exist? And then, of course, we can't eliminate the possibility that they are even traitors in some cases. So obviously, it's understandable why people would say, there's no political solution. Hwitgeard, what do you think about the legitimacy of our nation states today and the solutions for the problems that they presented us with?
Well, that's quite a lot to follow on from. But like Nick, I want to also thank Tyr for his contributions, what he's been saying recently, but also what he's been doing as well in his personal farming and living the life he is. It's very admirable. It's very inspirational to people, and it's not just the ideas that he has, but the life he's living that I think is a good influence for people. And with his post, it kind of hits on a similar note to what me and you have talked about before, and also Nick's as well, especially in light of having a response to the whole negative solution thing about clear them out, and how that doesn't seem to work. What we need is a positive vision. We need a positive ideal. We need something to look towards, to go, here is what we're aiming towards, here is what we believe, here is our particular vision. And having that positive vision is something that I feel that Tia has laid out quite well here. It's something that we need to affirm a positive worldview and say, here is where we stand, here is what we're looking for, here is the world that we envision, and not try to compromise around that. That's what I wanted to first say. But in response to point 4, I would agree, that all our current nation states are legitimate. I think over the past few years, there's been a bit of it's certainly shown that all these nations are illegitimate and clearly don't serve us. Every single one, bar probably Belarus, seems to have all ducked in for the World Economic Forum. most government leaders all seem to be young leaders associated with that as well. So very much every single government leader is in on the entire thing. But as Nick's pointed out, regardless of whether they belong to a particular organisation, if they subscribe to the overall Nuremberg moral paradigm, then they are very much compromised, because that eliminates any pro-racial vision, that eliminates any protectionism of their native stock. And while you do get a bit of flirtation with the idea of defending the natives, you get you'll get some politician talking about immigration in a very lukewarm way. On the whole, they're perfectly happy to accept immigration as long as it's done legally. So yeah, I'd agree that all nation states are illegitimate, and also, as Nick's pointed out, it's not that our nations are illegitimate; it's the current, it's the current state which they currently possess. So whether it's a republic, whether it's a kingdom, they currently represent a particular state at a particular time, and that can change in the future. And as seems to be the case in places like Spain, with a lot of the Catalan movements in there, there's very much a chance for a secession as well. So secession becomes a factor in terms of the dissolution of particular nation states, and again that goes along ethnic lines. So as long as we advocate for our ethnic interests within that, rather than advocating for our particular states, we put our energy into going along those ethnic lines rather than just political borderlines. But in terms of the idea of there is no political solution, I do think that it is a bit of a semantic issue to argue over how we can go through the system. I think the question itself of there is no political solution is basically advocating for, can we achieve our goals by playing the rules of the game? And obviously we cannot do that by playing the rules of the game. The idea of finding a non-political, like while everything is political, it does seem to be if only we vote one more time, or we do something more strategically, as long as we play by the rules of the game, we can achieve those ends through it. And that's clearly not the case. We need new parallel institutions that we can that can still be legitimate and still function alongside the current system. And while that is illegitimate and eventually collapses, we can invest our energy, invest our community into those parallel systems, and that is the non-political solution. It's to create a parallel political solution. Well, to create a parallel political system, there can be a political solution.
Yeah, I think I don't want to, give anyone the impression that I think if you, if you just vote for the Republicans in America, one more time, they're gonna pull through, or just trust the Tories, trust the plan.
Just vote harder.
Yeah, vote harder, exactly. Although, I would say in the European situation, there is a lot more potential for the formation of political parties that are outside of, a dominating, Labor Tory or Republican Democrat binary situation. It's one thing to say that the solution is to dismantle and replace, the current structure. That's a pretty big ask. that's generations in the labor of that. And then, it's also, I think, worth contemplating that if I wanted my adversaries, my opponents, people that I don't want to have any sort of influence or power, if I wanted them completely weak and impotent, one of the things I would tell them is to, don't get involved in politics. Just demoralize them to the point of inactivity. So, yeah, I think the political parties have all let us down. Democracy, I think, has become very muddled, and it definitely it deserves all the criticism that it gets. But we still have to play. We still have to participate. You mentioned that we can't win the game as it's rigged against us, but I think we don't have a choice but not to play it. It's or if you want to even use a different metaphor, it's the eternal struggle. It's the eternal struggle, and that is what we are fated to do. But you guys can jump in with your thoughts on this. I know it's a very broad topic here.
Well, there is like I see that Woodlander in chat is saying that it's semantics to say that the political, we're actually not allowed to think about politics as a population in the West, because most people mean a political party gaining power and making a drastic change. And that's really the point. We have been psyoped generationally into thinking that politics is a bunch of cucks discussing the tax code, whereas politics, understood historically, and for this understanding was brought forth, right, formalized by Carl Schmitt, is really political systems fighting with each other over which idea will rule. This is essentially a variation on Hegelian dialectics, right? So I will reiterate what the Republican Party or the Tories or even parties like Front National or Fratelli d'Italia. I know Front National, they have a new name now, but I don't remember it. That is less political than what we are doing in our little corners of the internet, because we are the ones actually waging a struggle to upend society, right? Whereas they are debating the finer points of the tax code and the correct number of legal immigrants, even the supposed populist-based parties. I will reiterate, politics is men fighting for their ideals, which are fundamentally diametrically opposed to one another, such as, for example, us against the system, and not a bunch of cucks in suits arguing over where in the tax code to place commas, such as what goes on in the United States Congress. This is an important distinction to make, and this is why I brought it up, although I admit I could have worded it better. So, yeah, there's that.
If I could just jump in.
Go ahead.
When I made that statement, I mean, a lot of it was broad strokes, because when you step back and you take a look at the whole situation, you want radical change at the top level all the way down, right? That's what we desperately want, because we look at this and we go, there is no future in this current system. As far as, I mean, stating that there is no political solution on that level currently where we stand, I think your caveat of there is no political solution now, that's valid, because we are not at the helm of the propaganda machine. We are not in control of the narrative, right? That, what did you call it? The Nuremberg paradigm, moral paradigm. As long as those things are, these pillars that hold up this roof over our heads, we're not going to be able to get out from underneath this and make anything better. And so, I mean, we can already start talking about what was point number 6, which I would have had as like the final point a little bit, because that's what I think is the solution for now. And like you said, Nix, with politics, with local politics, and doing things at the level that you can control. And those are things that I'm a big fan of. It's just when we take that, big zoom out, look at our nations, like even right now, as far as the legitimacy, the way Switzerland has treated the Romansh people, which is a very small group of people that speak the last of one of the Latin languages. I think it's the closest one to what would have been spoken during the Roman Empire. Those people have suffered immensely under Swiss government. And so does that mean that the Swiss government is a legitimate entity that should be in control of those people, their identity, their culture, their language? I don't think so, because now they're trying to backpedal a little bit and do the right thing for these people. But for a very long time, they haven't been great at supporting these people and encouraging birth rates and encouraging growth. And they've kind of squeezed them out of the places that they used to inhabit. So that's just a small snapshot. And then if we were to look at Switzerland as a whole, I don't know how great it is to have, French, Italian, German, and Romansh all under one nation when they're all such different identities and they function very differently. The only thing that holds them together right now is their shared wealth. They There's oil and water here. Like it's very fascinating. So in that sense, like you look at Switzerland as a nation, you're like, well, do I really believe that this should be a thing, a place? I'm not sure. I don't know if that's legitimate. I mean, Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg, if you look at Saxony, if you look at all these different groups, Thuringia, you start going, they're very different also in how they behave and how they identify, and their religion is also different. If you look at Bavaria is Catholic, and the majority of Germany is Lutheran, for example. There's a lot of lines that divide us. And I think that when power is so big as it is right now, you just look at it and you go, this is overwhelming. We should be splitting this up. We should be breaking it down into pieces because there is no hope here. So I do believe that there's action that we can take. I don't want that to be a black pilling thing. That's why I made the sixth one, this point number 6. But I want to acknowledge that, like, we can't stop the war going on between Russia and Ukraine on our level. And that's a travesty. What's happening is not okay, but it's happening. And so is there a political solution? Can we do something there? I don't know. I'm not willing to go pick up arms and go to Ukraine because I struggle with the imperialist nature of NATO and the West just as much as I struggle with the imperialist nature of Russia. Yet in the middle between these two, we see that Ukrainians are just getting smashed by a shitty government and then a really, really cruel enemy. So these are these kinds of things where I look at that and I just go, these problems are so big that I have to, on some level, kind of resign myself to accept that I cannot fix that. That is a political issue outside of my reach. I wish we had enough people that could vote our way out of it, but that just doesn't seem to be remotely possible due to the fact that we are censored and we don't have control of the propaganda machine. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover in that the sense it's really broad strokes. And then I want to go down to the individual level of what we can actually do in order to at least move in the right direction. So I hope that kind of helps.
You know what the irony, I think, is? Because for my own personal red pilling journey was, I got into politics because I wanted to fix things, right? You don't live well, your society doesn't really function well. So you try to solve problems, and then you realize that all of the solutions that the mainstream, or even like the edgy mainstream or permitted opposition uh, ideologies and parties offer you, you understand these are inadequate. So you keep tugging at that thread. And it's some really basic questions like, why is my city dirty? Why is there such a preponderance of crime? Why do we have such a high rate of cruelty to animals? And then you pull on that thread, and you realize all three of these things, they have a common root. You have a large population of non-whites in your city. This affects your quality of life. This affects pollution because they burn garbage to heat their homes. They throw garbage everywhere. And so fundamentally, we are trying to solve the problem of white survival and white sovereignty, because downstream of it are the solution of so many problems with today's society. Fundamentally, our societies could be very nice places to live if we didn't have so many non-whites. And we would have fewer problems, and those problems which would remain would be more easily solved. That is my honest opinion. And of course, like Pox said, this is a generational struggle. And recently, I've been a little under the weather because, I'd been thinking, this can't work. Not going to win. But then it hit me, no, we're going to win. It's just not likely to happen in my lifetime. And I'm being selfish that I won't be able to take part in the victory parade. So that's bringing me down a little bit. But yeah, I would say that, yeah, understand which problems you can solve right now, but do not forget that these problems, we can solve them. We actually have the solution to most of them. And we should not be afraid of tugging away at the thread of problems. We should encourage people to broaden their mind, to really just uncover the root causes of problems in society. So, for example, I always say to people, if you want to red pill white women, just bring up the statistics on animal cruelty. Who does it? Who does the cockfighting? Who does the dog fights? Who is, you know, who ritually slaughters animals in a cruel and evil way, like the kashrut and halal butchery. And you will be surprised at white women's reaction. The protective instincts are just going to kick in.
To the point of things we can all do in our personal lives. I don't know if you guys saw Keith Woods on his Telegram today. Earlier this morning, Keith Woods is, he's like Marmite, I think. He's got people who really love him. I've made some criticisms of him, particularly during the height of the scamdemic. But I've always said as well that he does good work. And I think, his mind and his heart are both in the right place. But I know that he has rubbed some people the wrong way, including some of my guests tonight. But, all that aside, I don't know if you guys saw today that on his Telegram, he put up a poll earlier this morning. It's been up, for hours and hours. It's been up all day. It's almost 3,000 votes as of now. And he asked, "What are you doing to support the spread of your political beliefs?" And 31% do nothing. 31% of the people who responded to his poll, and he's got almost 21,000 followers on his Telegram. And of these almost 3,000 votes, 31% don't even boost content that they like on a social media site like Twitter. They don't do any publishing or writing. They don't make any audio or video content on TikTok, YouTube, or podcasts. They don't donate to activist content creators or organizations. They don't do real life activism. They don't offer their skills or services in terms of editing, lawfare, or fundraising. They do none of the above. And I just seen that a few moments ago, Keith responded to that development in his poll saying, quote, "According to this poll, 1/3 of you contribute nothing. I don't get how you can be red-pilled and it not translate into enough conviction to even make a Twitter or contribute to the price of a coffee. Just passively consuming content while your civilization burns. I get that not everyone can get involved in real life, but anyone can at least do," I think we got the word "do" there. Anyone can do, dyslexia. Anyone can do at least one thing on that list. And I think he's right on that. A lot of times we just complain, we just diagnose problems, we just act like the building inspector, saying, "Here's all the problems," but we don't act like the architects ever. And, it may seem like small fry, it may seem like meaningless stuff to make a Twitter account or boost, the people who do have these accounts, they do have these profiles. Or it may seem like nothing to make a donation or whatever. And people might have, a dim view of activism and might think that activism is really ineffective and kind of gay. Fine. But you have to find something to contribute. And I do believe that what we do matters. I think, again, this is a long struggle. It's an eternal struggle, and we are at a time in the struggle where it's quiet bombs for silent wars. It is a propaganda war. It's an information war, and we should all be soldiers in it. And really, there is no distinction between who is a soldier, who's a combatant, and who isn't. So what do you guys think about Keith's poll there, and the fact that 31% of the respondents don't really do anything?
That's really eye-opening. I can understand that a lot of people will have different engagements externally of what they do online. A lot of people don't want to mix their real life activity with their online activity for fear of doxing. So I can see why some people will be hesitant to say that if they do certain things, they don't want it to bleed over in some way. But I'm just really surprised that they don't even do anything. Like not even like boosting other people, helping out other people, like paying and like contributing for certain podcasters and things like that. It just seems really. I think Frothy's commented on this issue before. Not only the Jerry Springer right, but the fact that so many people in these circles seem to see it as just pure entertainment, and as far as they're concerned, they can just consume everything and then leave it and go back to normal. And it just seems absurd why they'd want to go back to normal when that normal is the very thing that they're complaining about.
Fellas, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there is a ton of inaction. You don't have to necessarily be, putting your face out there or trying to make content or communicate, but the simple things of just like having conversations with those that you have a relationship with. So I work with people often, and so I'll feel them out. I'll warm them up to ideas. I use a lot of jokes, and I use comedy as my kind of subversive tool to get people laughing at things. And then I'll watch their reaction and see, and then I'll try and take it a step further and a step further. And if you can do that in your day-to-day, suddenly you're going to get to a point where you look around and you go, I know a lot of people who hold the same ideological views I do. And that network becomes very powerful. So, for example, all the people I sell eggs to, they probably would align with me ideologically about 80-85%, which is saying something. And that's just from feeling people out and then, oh, okay, yeah, well, why are you doing this? Why are you, you work a normal job, and then on top of that, you have chickens and you do meat rabbits and you're in sheep and all of this. And those kinds of doors are really useful, and they make huge differences because not a lot of people are necessarily searching for the solutions that we are trying to encourage other people to move towards. So I think that that's a really important thing, is that everybody, if you are looking at the situation and you do nothing, you are worse than those who are fighting against us. You are in the traitor group in my eyes, because everything's messed up and you just stand there. Like we said, the difference between combatants and civilians in this kind of conflict doesn't really exist. So if you're not on the team doing something for the cause, then you are just as bad as a politician who is opening the doors for more immigration. So
yeah, one of the things that frustrates me is that we do have a lack of funding, and we live in occupied territory. I say this all the time. We live in occupied territory. We are rebels behind enemy lines. We are in occupied territory. We have to keep our head down. We have to be smart. We have to keep our wits about us. And I've often said that using platforms like Twitter and YouTube is like using the enemy's printing press in the 20th century or the 19th century to make your rebel propaganda. But you have to break into the government printing press to do it, and that's not a very sustainable way of doing things. But all that said, all those difficulties in our path, we do seem to have a lack of imagination or a lack of impetus. And I've talked about things in the past that I wish I could put together. I don't have the wealth to do it. I don't have the skills to do it. I'm just a guy. But I remember during the lockdowns and things like that, I remember talking about how, why don't we put together some sort of parallel system of almost like a web of donation possibilities. So not for content creators, for us, we're supposed to be a community. We're supposed to be looking out for our kin, our folk, but so infrequently we seem to be doing that, actually. And when I was seeing and hearing of people having their livelihoods destroyed because of the ridiculous and malevolent COVID policies, something that came to my mind was, why don't we create some sort of system where people can pool in donations, and those donations can go to the people who need it? We already have something like Give, Send, Go, trying to be alternative to GoFundMe. These things are possible. With regards to online content and the propaganda war, for a long time now, I've desired something like a Netflix for the dissident right, where instead of having to pay for dozens and dozens of different subscriptions to even dozens more platforms to support all your favorite guys, we could have a singular platform where all of our stuff is, and then it would just be one subscription for the people who want to chip in and keep this thing going. And with that one paid subscription, they would get access to pretty much everyone who wants to be on that platform. But again, I don't have the means to set these up, but it's just a...
Well, Fuentes already has cozies, and how is that going?
Well, Fuentes is I don't know, he's not the smoothest operator, and he associates himself with some of the most unsavory characters, so that could be its own undoing.
Right. I mean, I like your idea, Pox, but there is a risk, if all of us, including our financial information and all our people's financial information, were in one place, that will make one very juicy target for Antifa, for the enemy, right? So there's how do I put this? There are some advantages to being small and disorganized.
Decentralized.
Yeah.
What if we go analog instead of digital? So
I
let's...
tried that. It's not
Did
very
it?
fun.
It didn't work. Because I look at for example, Owen Benjamin, the comedian. He's a wild cat, a wild card, and he's got a lot of fruity opinions. But at least his model of he has had a PO box where people have sent in donations, and he reads those donations live, and he's used that to fund purchases of land in the United States. So things like that make me go, it's analog, and thus it makes it harder for disruption. And so I love the idea of having an alternative platform with a subscription for all of us that we could try and figure out a way for. And then I also love the idea of putting your money where your mouth is when we see someone in need. I mean, I don't know if you guys were tracking, but Red Ice, the guys, Hendrik and Lana, when they had their medical bills, and I chipped in money and everybody chipped in money, and you just saw just huge amounts of funding. Like they raised like 25,000. And that is such a powerful testament about we do have financing. We just need the right cause and the right modes of making that happen. And people will do it if we just, it's one of those things. I built a business, and I remember standing in the room, and I could see how that business was going to look. And everybody else in the room, my partners, were looking at it and going, I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't know. Are you sure that this is the right location? Are you sure that this is going to work? And I said, trust me. They're like, oh, well, should we get a bigger location? This one, it's not as central as we'd like it to be. And I said, look, for the money we have and the location that we need, this is the spot we need to do it in. And that business grew, exploded. It went great. 9 years later, I sold it. I'm no longer a part of it, but it just takes somebody with vision saying, we can do this. Let's start, and get the wagon circled up and starting to, okay, let's try and do this. I mean, I don't know. I love these kinds of ideas. And Nix and I, we've talked just privately about different ideas of even trying to do things from a legal perspective, which I also think would be absolutely amazing if we could start moving towards that as well. So I love these ideas, and I would love that we would talk more about this and try and actively find solutions to these problems that we're facing.
Yes, so since Tyr let the cat out of the bag, there is something. It's really the beginning of an idea more than an idea, but it could grow to be something beautiful in the legal sphere on the European continent. Now, if you guys don't mind, you were very, very scolding of the movement and everyone who answered Keith's poll. I think I'm going to position myself as the defender of the passive majority over here. Well, passive plurality. There are 31%. First of all, the white pill is, of course, that 69% of the people who responded are doing something, right? They're not doing nothing. 61% conversion on, I don't know, like if you get 10% of your audience to donate, you can live off of podcasting usually. We have 61% of the people responding to Keith's poll. They're at the very least boosting things. They're doing things. The people who did not select none of the above. But I'm going to place the blame for the inactivity, for the inertia, not so much on the people following us, but more, I would say, on us as content creators, because we do occupy leadership positions in this movement. And let's just go point by point on this thing. So, 8% of people at the time of discussion, more people will probably vote in the poll later. 8% are making audio or video content, TikTok, YouTube, podcasts, etc. Right? And I'm just gonna say, right, this is a big ask. It takes specialized equipment. It takes a degree of confidence, a degree of not so much, but a degree of training to be able to speak confidently into the void and sound intelligent while at it. And I run the writer's block, and one thing I learned having a lot of writers over the years is not all writers are talkers. In fact, not a lot of people are talkers. Speech making is a specialized skill for which you need innate talent and practice. Then you got 28% are donating to activists, content creators, or organizations. And I would say, yeah, it's always better to have more people donate. However, we need to understand that the economy is tough. Maybe people will donate less. And I always say to my audience, if you got to choose between paying the bills or sending me a super chat, pay your fucking bills. I'll survive. 23% are engaged in real life activism. This is actually commendable. That means that, you know, more than 1/5 of the people who responded are not sitting on their asses at home and just clicking online, but they're actually out there doing something. Is that something useful? Yeah, it's a different question altogether, but they're doing something. It's 1 rather than 0. Now, I would say that the threshold parameter there is courage, right? Are you willing to do this? Are you willing to engage in right-wing activism? And more specifically, like not even right-wing, identitarian activism. Like it's like that meme that was posted today on Guide to Culture, right? Neo-folk bands saying that they're left-wing or apolitical while looking like, well, use your imagination. Even if you're like a left wing and still identitarian, like all 3 of those people left in Europe, you still face serious risks of losing your livelihood, losing reputation, right? Being disavowed by family members, which is something that really snuck up on me. I did not expect it to happen.
Yeah.
And ultimately, in places where Antifa is allowed to rampage, or BLM, you actually your life is at risk, your property is at risk, your car could be destroyed by these people. So I would say more than 1/5 of at least Keith's audience is courageous enough to actually brave all those dangers. That's a white pill. We got to be realistic here, people. I mean, we are still the most hated movement, I would say, in the history of the West. We're still persecuted wherever we turn.
Both prosecuted and persecuted.
yeah, sorry, I misspoke. And then you have like 32, and considering all of that, more than 1/5 of people actually going out there, picketing, leafletting, putting up stickers, even just showing up to protest. I know in Ireland they protest the hotels where they house migrants. That's actually admirable. I admire those people. You got 32% people boosting content on popular social media like Twitter. That number seems a little low to me. I can't. Maybe it's like people just overlook that, or a lot of the people who voted none of the above do not consider activity on social media to be any form of contribution. However, I personally, when I responded to the poll, did not check that because I'm not over on popular social media. I'm on Twitter. I mean, I'm not on Twitter. I've been banned from Twitter. And I'm on Telegram, and I'm on Gab, and I'm on Post, and I'm on Odyssey, but I'm not on popular social media. And I'm going to say something very controversial here. And I know, Pox, you're going to definitely disagree with me, maybe the other guys too. Unless I would say you are psychologically resilient enough, if you're part of this movement and you're not a content creator, and even if you are a content creator, you may be better off not being up on popular social media, and especially Twitter, because Twitter, and I'm just going to say it, it's a fucking madhouse. I think that Twitter may be coded in a specific way to drive people crazy. It's
I totally agree with you on that.
I had this, Semyagog had this theory that's social media in general and the mainstream media but Twitter in particular, because it's such a rage inducing whatever the fuck it is. He called it Rwandan radio. It's like there was radio stations in Rwanda which were egging the Hutus on to kill the Tutsis, or was it the other way around? I mean, who cares? Rwandans, right? But it's like they're ginning up hatred against white people. That's what's going on with the mainstream
just also
media.
The way that Twitter has completely destroyed interaction, communication, the way that people are so snarky on Twitter, but then I don't know, it's sort of like a chicken and egg type of situation, but that same sort of snark and bitchiness you find now prevalent even in the halls of Parliament, on the floors of Congress. it's just reduced the discourse to such a low level, and such a catty, snarky level, that it's almost like, it's almost like a demon escaped from the CERN Hadron Collider or something, and it's just made everyone go insane. Twitter is, I totally agree that Twitter is, it's an enemy platform. It's an enemy platform. It's an enemy printing press. And I think, the brave, the few and the brave who can hold their own on Twitter, more credit to them. But it's not a place for everyone to be on. It can be very damaging to your mental health.
Yeah, and that's my point exactly. Now, Hwitgeard loves this old. It's like, I think it's like from 3 years ago article of mine where I say, what's so wrong about being in an echo chamber, right? And it's not an echo chamber, but being surrounded by people who agree with you on all the fundamentals is historically the norm. And it is now that we are exposed to people with all these, stupid ass opinions online that we're actually unraveling psychologically. And I advance this, it's not even a radical thesis, it's just an observation of historical norms that most people, for their psychological health, should be hanging around people who agree with them, and only specialized, and it's like not even priests of the religion, but specifically specialized priests of the religion should venture out into the wilderness and try and convert the savages. So your local prelate does not go... missionaries,
to interact with the enemies on Twitter, you have to be like a warrior monk almost.
Precisely. You're like the Prince Archbishop of, I don't know, some fucking place, and you're like a warrior bishop or whatever. And I know when I was on Twitter, I would feel the evil hand of Twitter creeping up my brain sometimes. Like for a second there, I could feel the very thing trying to psyop or mind fuck me in some way. And I had a rule: whenever I did that, I would turn off Twitter and out loud say, "This is a glow site." I would say it to myself just to underline the fact that I'm in enemy territory, and the things I see here could be deceptions. They could be precisely built to drive me insane. So boost if you can, but like I say, if this is an honest poll and only 32% of Keith's followers are even up on Twitter boosting this thing, if I know this does not mean they're off Twitter, right? The other people who did not pick that option. But I would say we need to get our people off of social media, popular social media in particular, because the voice of the enemy blares there at maximum volume, more than maximum volume, and these things wear people down by repetition. They drive us insane over time, and even the warrior monks may need to retreat to the monastery from time to time just to get your shit together, because I'm probably coming off as completely unhinged, which I am. I'm not going to deny that. So that's my position on social media. You got 8% of the respondents saying they're offering skills or services with regard to editing, lawfare, fundraising. Now I'm going to say here that the threshold parameters are first of all courage, because you got to meet in person, you got to appear with your face, with your name, and the second is skill. Now, the problem with skill, it's not so much that people lack skills. It's that this movement lacks the capital which people could mix with their labor, i.e. skills, and produce value, like economics 101, where the originary factors of production, land, capital, and labor. The labor could be out there. The land is a issue because we're over the internet, or just you can do it from your house, but the capital is not there, right? And this is why it's important to build institutions. You could be a nationalist lawyer, but unless there is an entire infrastructure to back you, you cannot. You're going to have to use your personal capital, like your own law office, to do the lawyering for the movement. And a lot of times, and I'm going to scold some people, you know who you are. A lot of times people were demanding free legal representations from nationalist lawyers in America. And as someone who worked as a lawyer for 7 years, it is a tough, exhausting, difficult job, and a lot of people stop doing it, even though they're very well paid, just because they cannot handle it. And we expect people to do it for free. And nationalist lawyers, they will drop their rates for ideological fellow travelers, but I don't think it's fair to expect anyone to work for free. So I would say, and that's like an example, but some other professions, right? We don't really exactly have the capital to absorb. Like, for example, if you're a nationalist bricklayer or welder or even a doctor, this movement, while it may want to use you, it cannot use you. In the future, this could change, right? But there are a lot of people with a lot of professions, and we just don't have the capital to admix with their labor and produce value for political value. And the next one is 11. That's publishing and writing. That's a specialized activity, just like making audio video content. I would say it's a more specialized activity. It relies even more on training and innate talent, and it relies, as someone who is a writer will tell you, it relies a lot on having a place where you can publish. However, this is actually a white. There's a white pilling moment here. We do actually have an abundance of places where we can publish as nationalists. I wouldn't say an abundance, but we're not exactly lacking in magazines and publishing houses and just webzines. So 11%, 1/10. Do we expect that 1/10 of the population has writing talent? Just general population? No, I would say less than 5% of the general population has talent for writing, and an even lesser percentage of that 5% with writing talent has the patience to write, or really just the wherewithal to have anything worth writing about. So I would say 11% of the respondents publishing or writing, that those are phenomenal numbers, and it represents the fact that I believe the best people on the planet, or among the white race, are in this movement. So that's my apologia, my devil's advocate. I'm not even devil's advocating. I'm actually defending the passive masses. Insofar as they are passive, I would put the blame more on us, the content creators, who are figureheads, who are leaders of this movement, for not having constructed the capital necessary, for not having normalized this movement enough that more people are courageous enough to come forth. And I don't know, some of the blame we can be absolved of, because we are facing unprecedented opprobrium from the enemy, and we are
I think there's something to be said.
world-changing politics on a shoestring budget.
There's something to be said, though, that we don't support each other like our enemies do. This is something that many people have noticed and pointed out, that we on our side of things, we will virulently disagree with someone, and to the point of like disowning them and trying to ruin them over a disagreement of principle or some ideological debate, whereas our enemies, the quote unquote the left, they will stand by someone accused of a horrible crime or something, because they have a very strong friend enemy distinction. Just look at what happened with who was it in the UK, the former striker. What was his name? I hate when a name slips me. Hwitgeard. What's the name of the former England striker that was controversial? Lineker, Gary Lineker.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He basically crossed the line. He was being overtly political, and that's a no if you're a BBC employee, blah blah blah. And everyone came to his defense on the refugees welcome side. It didn't matter the ins and outs of whether he did something wrong. whether he, stepped over the line, broke the obligations of his contract with the BBC. It didn't matter. They all had his back. They all backed him up. Whereas, look what's happening with, for example, Matt Walsh in the American conservative scene. He's being attacked by conservatives. He's being counter-signaled and undermined by his fellow conservatives because they have a disagreement with his tone, or he's trying to cancel troons, just like the left is. So really, are you any better than the left? Because you're just trying to cancel them too. You're just another cancel culture. And this is why we lose all the time, because instead of having a very clear friend-enemy distinction and realizing, no, let Matt Walsh speak with, vituperative anger about the troons, and especially the ones who are trying to ruin the lives of children. Why bother undermining his point and his message because he's being too mean to the poor troons? Are you kidding me? But this is what we do. And then, we don't back each other up, perhaps as well as we should. We look for reasons to dislike someone rather than defend someone or stand up for someone. I think, we do have some reasons to look ourselves in the mirror from time to time, definitely.
But don't you think that, like, on some level, like, a lot of this comes from a lack of specific distinction as to who's on our side and who isn't?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then that's kind of why I made that list, was because it's like, okay, here's what I need if you're on my side. But that being said, I think that there is value to many people community. Like, a lot of people were flipping out when Kanye West was making all of his statements, right? And there was a lot of people saying, oh, this doesn't help, this makes things worse. And I personally thought, well, at least it's being said now. So now, if I'm in a group of people, I make a joke about Kanye West and how crazy he is and how he said that, and then I watch reaction and I start looking for allies, because it's a conversation point that creates that foot in the door that I can start to assess how people are reacting. And they're like, well, there are a lot of Jews in Hollywood. And then you go, okay, now I found someone, right? But I was just I get to play neutral, funny guy and be in this position where I get to use something that's happening that no one can ignore. And I'm using it to start sussing out people and finding who's on my side and who isn't. So that's why when people are like, oh, this is bad optics, it's not useful, I'm like, man, everything. We can use everything. But as far as clearly identifying who's on the team, who's not on the team, and then we have to start creating systems that support those that are content creators, that support the artists, that support our everything that we create that is counter narrative. So yeah, I think it's all useful, but we do need the principled structure of who's on the team and who's not. And that was kind of leading back into why I made that post in the first place.
Well, we can have a little latitude by doing like the Romans. You can have the core legions and you can have the auxilia, or you'll do it like the mafia. You got made guys and you got associates. You can only be a made guy if you fulfill these 7 specific, right? The 7 pillars of Tyr's wisdom. But if you agree with 4 out of 7, well, at least 4 out of 7, we can, and of course we can debate which are core, which are not core. You can be an auxilia, you can be an associate. You're not quite a wise guy, but actually you're not a made man, but you're a wise guy.
It's worth saying that for every movement, every community, followers are just as important as leaders. It's not that everyone needs to be trying to be a leader. In fact, if you have too much competition amongst egos, if you have basically too many cooks in the kitchen, you won't find much success. So it's not to say that everyone has to be making some public profile. Everyone has to be putting themselves at risk. leaders need followers just as much as men need leaders, as followers need leaders. So yeah, it's definitely there's definitely latitude to take advantage of and to utilize. Why don't we get back to the list? I think we did spend quite a long time, and then took a little bit of tangent on the second of Tyr's fundamental pillars. Again, we're saying that number one is pretty much just well understood. We believe that Europe is for the Europeans. Okay, so I'll let you guys decide. What do you think would be the next one that we should talk about? Tyr, what did you have as your number three? And then Hwitgeard and Nix, what would strike your fancy?
Well, we were already talking about technology and alt tech and using mainstream technology and platforms. So that was number three, is just basically stating that I do not believe that technology is going to, fix a lot of the problems that we have. People think, AI and how all of that works is going to, replace a lack of human beings that we're about to have, because this civilization, this standard of civilization that we have, isn't going to continue, in my opinion, without human effort. And so if a huge number of people just start dropping off, like the baby boomer population has been doing, there's not going to be this degree of civilization in existence. And I don't think technology can pick up the slack in that area. So that's kind of my take on it.
Hwitgeard, you've got very good ideas, very good thoughts on technology, the Faustian impulse, AI, things like that. You've been very concerned, I think, with AI lately.
Yeah.
So I'll throw it to you.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'd very much agree. On the harkening back to the previous topic when we're talking about voting through the system, that there's part of that of where I do think that there's a distinction between using the apparatus of the system compared to using the system itself, and I think that's a distinction we should have clarified earlier. But technology is very much an apparatus of the system, which is slowly becoming the system itself. So I think that distinction now is starting to blur. So previously we could have happily said, yes, we can use technology against it in our favor, but Ted has very much been vindicated that technology will essentially start to snowball, and it essentially becomes unstoppable. It's not that it's become sentient. It's not that the AI is somehow going to be sentient. It's still programmed by humans, but it is essentially going to become a system which essentially fulfills all the functions it needs to with as little human involvement as possible, and that means that it's very difficult to stop. Not to mention all the issues that people have with addiction concerning technology. The amount of people who are constantly staring at their mobile phones all the time, and that becomes a temporary solution to them. The worse the situation gets. So obviously they're seeing, well, a lot of normies are experiencing the very same effects of the cultural decline that we are, but they don't see it through the same lens. They don't have the right mental framework in which to understand what's going on. So they'll still feel quite alienated. They'll feel that sense of enemy. They'll feel quite depressed, and they'll turn to alternative methods to escape from it. And technology is very much fully equipped at this very point now to fill that gap, especially with what AI can do. It's bringing people into a new parallel world, a new form of escapism, a new way of being able to fulfill some of their needs. And the more detached they are from that real world by escaping into technology, the less likely they are to be able to offer any practical solution out of the system that we're in. So yeah, I think that technology, it won't fix the demographic situation. That's already well established. But I think that technology itself is a massive problem, purely because the more complex it becomes, the more that it basically separates us from our natural world, our natural environment, and our natural state of being, which is the very framework which gives us the ability to defend ourselves and our people and protect our demographics. It's essentially become a tool that's replacing any material and any biological structure which will work in our favor instead.
I saw earlier Tom Seaver mentioned that I have a Substack, and I don't know if you all have read the first piece that I published on that. It was called "The Man of Extinction," and it's about this rampant, relentless imposition of technology on us. And you're right, Ted K pretty much said it all. But my take on it was that I just keep having this recurring image of future society. And people talk about collapse a lot. And I don't really think that there's going to be much of a collapse. I think that even with declining IQ and declining or with muddled demographics, the technology is getting to a point where I think it, if not self-sufficient, it's certainly incredibly resilient. And all the systems dependent on it are also incredibly resilient, including the political systems that we were talking about earlier. They're incredibly resilient, incredibly adaptive, and they have a way of absorbing things that you would expect to be, killer blows. They have a way of just absorbing that impact and rendering it completely ineffective. And with this technology, I just see a future where the tech keeps people almost in a state of, I guess, numb satisfaction. And even though things around them are quite bleak, the tech will keep us comfortable, warm, well-fed, maybe not well-fed on healthy, nutritious food, but we'll be getting our calories in some form or another. And I wrote that there will even come a point where in future generations, the man of extinction, why is he the man of extinction? Because he won't even know the things that he's lacking. He won't know that he really does need to be in contact with some trees. He really does need to touch grass. He won't have an imagination. He won't have a desire to express his sentiments, his feelings, his emotions in poetry or painting or music or anything like that. Everything will just be satisfied through this tech apparatus. And I think that it's actually quite disconcerting, because we do often think, no, that a sort of collapse would be useful for us. But what happens if there is no collapse because the system is entirely self-sufficient? This high-tech system that's been created and in many ways imposed on us. That was one of Ted Kaczynski's major points, is that the technological advances, so-called advances of the post-industrial age, are really imposed on us. They are not organic developments like going from, stone to bronze, or attaching the wheel to a cart. These are very fast, very complex, quote unquote, advancements that are then imposed on us. And if we don't adapt to them, if we don't utilize them, we get left behind. And I don't know what are your thoughts on that, panel?
I want to kind of revert back to something actually, and I know it's a dead horse, but something the World Economic Forum cited, in that, they want to have these 15-minute cities where, it's all tech based, and people are moved around based on an app, right? So if you're working, you're in this building for this amount of time, which leaves your apartment available for someone else to use for some sort of meeting or some sort of other activity. And I see that, but even they admitted in their essay from the future that there will be those who decide not to go that direction. And they talk about the ones they left behind and how are they doing. They don't have modern medicine, and they don't have, and if that is anything to me, that was a massive white pill, because it was like, I hope that's the case. I hope that we're able to decide, nah, I'm not into that. I'm not going to participate with that whole regime and that program. And I will return to more of a subsistence living. And a lot of people think that that's going to mean, well, then you're not going to have access to high-tech weapons, for example, to defend yourself. And one of the things I like to cite for that is, basically, if you go to Africa, you'll find a bushman with an AK-47, or even if you're in the Hindu Kush mountains in Afghanistan, you'll find a goat herder with an AK-47 and a few grenades. And he may not even be a combatant, like he may not be a member of the Taliban, but they'll be cruising around with weapons that they could never create on their own. Never. And yet they have them. Why? Well, because they have something of value. For example, they could be farmers for a poppy field, which poppies are turned into heroin, for example. So then they have the means to purchase high-tech weapons when their lives are super low-tech. And because their lives are super low tech, it makes it very difficult on when you're a high tech army. You actually can't use all your high tech weapons on people that are very low tech. You can't use a cell phone to track them or get a voice recording if they don't have a cell phone. You can't figure out where they are if they don't have an Apple Watch or something that gives off a GPS signal. So these kinds of things are very interesting to me, in that I hope that we get to decide. I hope there is a split. A collapse, would be ideal. But if that doesn't happen, then I'm really hoping for some sort of split, because if that happens, there's going to be a very high chance that, sure, one side might have drones, but they will be so insulated from physical violence that anyone who is capable of that will be absolutely terrifying to them. So that gives me a little bit of comfort, makes you want to do a couple more push-ups and, just be as fit as you can be.
Nix, you did a stream on the Writer's Block about the road to Wigan Pier. And in that book by Orwell, there was a part where he wrote something that could very easily be superimposed on today's current thing. And it was basically him saying that, it's all well and good to criticize standardization, industrialization, and say that, you want to escape the industrial society, but you're already in it, and you can only criticize it from being inside of it. And this, I think, speaks to my concern with tech, is that we're already in this high-tech behemoth, and we can only criticize it from the inside. Look what we're doing right now. We're streaming on, multiple platforms with a Wi-Fi connection and things like that. And you have some pretty complex opinions on this. We talked about this the last time we did a stream about, the pros and cons of homesteading and things like that. So what do you think about technology and the role that it's playing? Will there be a collapse? Is technology self-sufficient? Is it useful? And in what ways is it useful for our cause? And all those other variables.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for bringing that up, and I'm amazed that Orwell may be the most quoted author who has never read. And so, like I said on that show, like I said on that show, I'm going to make it my mission for the time being to actually drag Orwell from under the heap of bullshit he's been buried under.
Mhm.
Because, like,
Mhm.
basically, people say when someone gets censored, oh, this is like 1984. But if you read 1984, you realize this is not a book about censorship. This is a book about mass mind control,
Mhm.
which is something much more relevant to our situation than censorship. Censorship is a method, right? It's the mind control that's the problem. I don't know if I should read like the passage from Wig and Peer.
Go
You
ahead.
actually summarized it pretty well.
His
So that,
words. I mean, yeah, I kind of remembered more or less. I read it.
yeah,
I scanned through it when you shared it a couple of
right.
days
He
ago.
says,
But
I
it
have it
lingered with
here.
me. It's very good. So go ahead and read it.
Yeah. So basically, so he's speaking about socialism. When you say, I object to mechanization and standardization, therefore I object to socialism, you're saying, in effect, I am free to. Oh, okay, I'm going to read the whole passage. Sorry. The distaste for progress in machine civilization, which is so common among sensitive people, is only defensible as an attitude of mind. It is not valid as a reason for rejecting socialism because it presupposes an alternative which does not exist. When you say, I object to mechanization and standardization, therefore I object to socialism, you're saying, in effect, I'm free to do without the machine if I choose, which is nonsense. We are all dependent upon the machine, and if the machine stopped working, most of us would die. You may hate the machine civilization, probably you are right to hate it, but for the present, there can be no question of accepting or rejecting it. The machine civilization is here, and it can only be criticized from the inside because all of us are inside it. It's only romantic fools who natter themselves that they have escaped, like the literary gent in his Tudor cottage with bathroom hot and cold, and the he-man who goes off to live a primitive life in the jungle with a Manleha rifle and 4 wagon loads of tinned food. And almost certainly the machine civilization will continue to triumph. And this was written in 1930. I don't know when it was written. It was
It's just
published in
brilliant
1937. Yeah.
how relevant that is to exactly what we've been talking about on multiple streams. It's just it's the more things change, the more they stay the same. Really.
Right.
But I just
And
think now, instead of like
yeah.
mechanization or industrialization, now the only minor change would be we're talking about high tech.
Exactly, and this actually segues into the one of the points I wanted to make. I don't really object to mechanization as long as it's how do I put this, out of sight, out of mind. And I think that we can find ways, and our civilization has in great parts found ways of putting it out of sight, out of mind, so we can enjoy mechanized civilization without its ugly um, um, side effects. However, there is one persona on Twitter. Before I was banned on Twitter, I followed him religiously, you could say. He goes by Tanzele. He's also on Gab, I think, and he's associated with America First, but he's not. He's not like. He's a very unique guy. He talks a lot about industrial processes and the American School of Political Economy, which is the forerunner of the German historic economics school. Like all these terms mixed up in my head. Anyways, he said this very interesting thing, is like, you've been psyoped into thinking that technology is Candy Crush rather than machine tooling, right? And this is not a random direction which technological progress has taken. I believe that this is partially planned, that partially the reason that social media looks the way it looks, that partially the reason information technology has developed the way it has developed is specifically to effectuate greater degrees of control over the population. Now, I don't know, but the audience, um, um, anyone else, but I'm old enough to remember the internet in the 90s and early 2000s. It's just how freer it was, how more that is nonsense. I am not an American. I just have an American accent because of
I want to
historical
say
reasons.
that of the four people speaking
There are
today,
no Americans
only
on
one
this
of them was
show.
born in America, but I actually also Italian. I've lived in Europe most of my adult life. Nix is Macedonian. Tyr is Canadian, of a sort of passport, like we said earlier, nation state, but is in fact a Germanic man living in Switzerland. And Hwitgeard is English. So I'm sorry that you felt there were too many Yanks on this stream tonight, but I do hope you stay.
If it makes them feel any better, I can try and do a little bit of a British accent. I could put it on for him just to make him feel better. You know,
Do I,
give him
do
a
I
spot
need
of
to
tea.
get the Balkanoid out of
Not bad,
storage?
it's
I
not
can do
bad.
that.
And if you want, I'll try and talk in an Australian accent instead.
Or I could do my German accent.
I was saying
Would
something.
that make
I
him
saw
feel
that, I saw
better?
that comment. That tickled me very much.
I could make him feel much better if I use my German accent. If I tell him this is how I
Very
normally
good.
talk.
Let's
Come
make
on,
it.
don't
Let's make
bullshit
it.
This would be better.
Let's make it a continental. I'll put on my. What should I use? My Irish side or my Italian side? I'll choose
But
one.
you already sound vaguely continental, Pox.
Yeah, I've been told, so I don't know what the complaint was. Maybe you're the one that sounds too American, Nix.
Probably. You want to know the irony? When I was 16, I hated my Balkanoid accent, and so I worked very hard to lose it. And so, right now I don't even naturally have it. I have to affect it. In any case, I was talking about industrial processes, right? Anyways,
Indeed. Carry on.
my point is, right, what we mean by technology, and this may be another semantic point, but it's important to understand that we've been trained to consider Facebook and Candy Crush and basically a red dot appearing on a generally blue background and stimulating your dopamine receptors. We've been trained to think of this as technology, whereas we have forgotten what technology really is, which is a means of improving our lives through substituting human labor, right? Mechanical labor for human labor, so the human labor is directed towards something better. So we communicate here, and we over vast distances in time, in space, not in time. No, time travel is still.
Sorry.
We communicate over these vast distances in space, and thereby eliminate the need for messages being run, right? For messengers, for horses, for all these things, and we save a bunch of that labor. And like a very practical example, when Russia was sanctioned in early 2022, it lost access to Facebook, it lost access to a bunch of websites, to a bunch of quote-unquote technology. But what really hurt it, what really hurt the Russian economy, just took a massive chunk out of it, was the cessation of importation of Western machine tools. Very, old school technology, the things you need to make machines, right? The machines we use to make machines, to make other stuff, right? Including military hardware. And Russia cannot substitute, they cannot substitute these things, and neither can America if it lost access, for example, to German or Austrian or Czech or Japanese machine tool producers. And this is something that's been pointed out, that America is actually in a very precarious position industrially, less so than Russia, but more than European countries, more than Europe. And I would just say that when we talk about technology, we need to understand that the technological turn we have seen, and I think it begins with the mid 2000s, right? The middle or late Bush era, is probably not representative of technology and technological development as such, but rather a somewhat guided march towards a certain end goal where vast swathes of, in fact, the overwhelming majority of the population are buried with their noses in their smartphones, hooked on social media, and of precarious mental health. Because, like I mentioned, Twitter is a fucking madhouse, but Facebook is not much better, and neither are the mainstream social media. And I was explaining to the missus over dinner just how Instagram warps our idea of what attractive is, right? By linking it to an image. Whereas, a human being is a whole thing in motion. Not even a video can capture what a human being genuinely is. And so a lot of young people, when they doll themselves up to be attractive or when they work out, they do not, like, you get guys who are built like the golden one, like Marcus Folin, and they cannot get a girlfriend. Why? Because they work out their muscles for Instagram, but they do not work out anything else. And you need the confidence and the charisma a lot more than the muscles if you want to get a girlfriend. And I don't think this is part of the natural development of technology. I think there is something malicious, and I think there's something somewhat planned. Maybe it's a conspiracy, maybe it's like a general direction systemically born of the ruling class, that they wanted to develop these social media and have us think of this as cool and technological, whereas previously we considered, like, more traditionally, because when I was a nerd in the 90s and early 2000s, I dreamed of space travel and flying cars, right? Not of Facebook. And all of a sudden in the mid 2000s, the cool technological hip thing, if you're like a young smart guy, was Facebook and Google Circles. You remember that? And all of these things, there was so much hype around these new social media that we abandoned the old web, which was much freer, which was much more fun, much safer. There were fewer psychos on the random forums, right? So keep that in mind, that technology by itself may not necessarily be evil, but however, the current thing which is called technology, which is mostly social media, smartphones in every pocket, combined with the surveillance state, is actually evil. And not just because it surveils us, but because it actively tries to direct our thoughts and behaviors towards what can only be described as insanity. And that is the end of my apologia for technology for this week.
All right, very good. We've been going for almost 2 hours. I'd want to make sure that this stream doesn't go for 5 like the last one I did. So there was one of these fundaments that I thought would be very spicy. We have a practicing pagan on the panel in Hwitgeard. We have a Greek Orthodox with Nyx. Tyr, I think you are also pagan, or simply agnostic about these things, but you grew up Christian, son of you're a preacher kid, but have since gone a different direction, kind of similar to my story, I suppose. So let's talk about what was the last item on Tyr's list: Universalist religion. Let me just get the full quote again. Universalist religion is evil. So that's quite a strong word there. If you are European and your religion is more important than your ethnicity, then we are not on the same team. And I think we all know what universalist religion you're referring to, particularly when it comes to Europeans and when it comes to our community. Yes, I would say that those who would put their religion first and those who seek a revival of it or something like that, and are even, more or less okay with locking arms with people of other ethnicities or other races, so long as they share that religion in common. I would say that no, they're not on the same side as we are, because we want something a lot different. Tyr, it's your it's your manifesto, so I'll let you flesh this out a bit more. Why is the Universalist religion, in particular, something that you find so loathsome? And what do you think then should be the focus of our energies, or loyalties, rather?
So yeah, I mean, evil is a strong word. I grew up in the church, and I did 1 year of study of theology. So I'm a failed theologian. The biggest issue that I have with it is that when we start saying everyone's the same, it leads towards this, equality, which I am opposed to entirely. There are massive differences in just specific groups alone. You'll get people who are much smarter, people who are much taller, people who can jump farther, people who can run better distances. And we know these things are inherently true. But yet, when you create a religion that says this is something that can work for anyone who wants to use it, that's not true. Because we are so different. If we look at nutrition, for example, our digestive system as a European, or specifically as a Northern European, you can digest milk at a rate that the Chinese could never dream of. As a matter of fact, a lot of Chinese will come to Switzerland. They'll go and see Zermatt and see the Matterhorn and be like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And they'll have some raclette. And then they'll end up in the hospital because their system shuts down with all the cheese. They can't digest it. And next thing you know, they have to have medically assisted shits so that they can function again, so they can get back on their airplane after buying another expensive watch and fly back to Beijing or wherever the fuck they come from. So we are so specifically different with our diet. How is it that we would think that one religion could be the answer for anyone who was interested? Oh, if it works for you, if it fits for you, you can use it. We know that to be a lie, a bold-faced lie. Your spirituality needs to be rooted in, and I read from Imperium Press, The Ancient City, and I loved that book. That book helped so much because it was pre even the Roman pantheon or even the Greek pantheon. It was before that, where it's all about your ancestors. They are the reason you exist. They gave you the gift of life. You must respect them and pay it forward by giving to your children. You are a moment, a representation of a greater root of people that have struggled, sacrificed, and done a lot in order for you to exist, in order for you to participate in this existence that is wonderful. And the hard parts just make the good parts that much better. So, in my opinion, if we're starting to go in this direction of, well, like if it fit whatever you choose, it's too much individualism, it's too much choice. And most people, they don't want choice anyways. They're slaves. They want to be slaves. So people are different. Religion should be different. There shouldn't be a one size fits all. It should be specific to you, to your location, to your culture, to your ethnicity. Because anything that says, well, it's for anybody who wants, well, that is this kind of equality creating ideology that is cancerous and will corrupt, destroy, and eventually homogenize everything. And I'm against that. I mean, I'm a tribalist. I love the idea of tons of city states all over Europe. So that's why I just think if we use anything, and people, I mean, even European women will love to go to India to find themselves, to go meditate under a yogi and probably get fucked by a few dudes. I hate that idea that you can go to India and you can gain some sort of spiritual knowledge that you couldn't gain from your own ancestors, from your own people, from your own nature and your own experience.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
something that's always annoyed me as well. People Europeans looking elsewhere for things that we have here. Even if you turn to Christianity for your spirituality, I think it's, at least Christianity is, because it's been in various European countries for quite some time, it's been heavily Europeanized. It's still a better alternative than, you know, I need to go to India and find myself and, you know, find spirituality there. No, we have spiritual fountains in our own people, in our own traditions, in our own religions. And I would say that interacting with, you know, nasty folks on Twitter lately, there is a freeing sensation when you, as a European nationalist, as a European dissident, when you cut yourself free from the Universalist religion, when you cut yourself free from Christianity, they don't expect it, actually, because they will constantly try to use Christianity against you. And in particular, when you're dealing with you know, people who are of a small hat wearing fashion persuasion, and I've observed that it's actually, you know, it's one of the worst rhetorical positions to be in. This is like the E. Michael Jones position, where you're really saying that your only principal objection to subverters and things like that is that, you know, they rejected Jesus Christ. And when you are approached with someone saying, you know, oh, it's not very Christian of you to oppose, you know, for example, I see this being done to lots of Irish Catholics. Well, it's not very Christian of you to have a problem with all these, you know, refugees. How can you not take in refugees? Don't you know that St. Patrick was a refugee and he wasn't even Irish? So how can you have a problem with, you know, hundreds of thousands of Arabs and African men being dumped into your local town? But once you break free of that, you can actually deal with these interlopers and these ankle biters in a much more effective way. So just interacting with our enemies on a madhouse platform like Twitter, you can see how in real life situations, the Universalist religion is it's almost like a ball and chain tied to our ankles. I've just observed that. I've experienced that on many occasions since I've had a change of mind over the past 2 years now regarding Christianity. I'll let Hwitgeard jump in, and then I'd like to hear Nick's thoughts on this as a Orthodox Christian.
Well, to just enhance
First,
Tyr's
Hwitgeard. First, Hwitgeard. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
That's all right. Well, before, I don't want to carry on my usual bashing Christianity, because I thought I'd be a bit more nuanced with things. Instead, can I read out 2 paragraphs from a very interesting book that I think are quite relevant here?
Go on.
This is from James Russell's The Germanization of Early Medieval Christianity, which is an absolutely fantastic book, and I thoroughly recommend it. Especially just because it shows the interplay between not only how pagans became converted to Christianity, but also how Christians adopted a lot of paganism as well. But it also shows that there's no standard universal form of universal Christianity. There's all different nationalized forms, each with their own different system of how it reacts to the local and national population. So it's always worth keeping that in mind, that even though we're dealing with a form of universalism, there are different localized forms of universalism that react to the local population in different ways as well. But A Recent Social History of Pauline Christianity by Wayne A. Meeks provides important insights into the social structure and social psychology of the early Christian community. He notes that the image of the initiate being adopted as God's child and thus receiving a new family of human brothers and sisters is a vivid way of portraying what a modern sociologist might call the resocialization of conversion. The natural kinship structure into which the person has been born and which personally define his place and connection with the society is here supplanted by a new set of relationships. Meeks contrasts the spontaneous, ad hoc nature of the Christian community and its regular use of terms like brother and sister, and the emphasis on mutual love, both of which reinforce the communitas of the Christian groups, with the society of the world, exemplified by the closely structured, hierarchical society of the Greco-Roman city. The attempt of the early Christian communities to emulate and eventually supplant the natural social biological relationships of the family unit and the larger ethnic community contributed to a perception by them, a perception of them, by some non-Christian Roman citizens as a disruptive social phenomenon and a danger to the security of the state. This perception is at least partly attributed to the novel Universalist form which Christianity took. Robert L. Wilkin has examined this fundamental distinction in form as it appears in Calsus's critique of Christianity. Second paragraph. There is another dimension to this exchange between Calsus and the Christians. It is not simply a debate between paganism and Christianity, but a debate about a new concept of religion. Calsus sensed that Christians had severed the traditional bond between religion and a nation or people. The ancients took for granted that religion was indissolubly linked to a particular city or people. Indeed, there was no term for religion in the sense we now use it to refer to the beliefs and practices of a specific group or people, or of a voluntary association divorced from ethnic or national identity. The idea of the association of people bound together by religious allegiance with its own traditions and beliefs, its own history, and its own way of life, independent of a particular city or nation, was foreign to the ancients. Religion belonged to a people, and it was bestowed on an individual by the people or nation from which one came and in which one lived. And I think that's a very good summary of the radical shift that has happened by universal religion. It's very much severed people away from their ethnic duties, their ethnic bonds, and put them into a much more. It's put them into what Alexander the Great deemed the oikoumene, a kind of a citizen of the world, a world religion in which everyone belongs, centralized around this universal axis mundi. So I think that's an important shift that we as nationalists need to look backwards to, or at least look forwards to re-establishing a kind of a splintering away from that central globalized universal axis mundi which everyone revolves around. While we all share a much more universal and connected world, we also need to find ways in which we can splinter off into our own separate national groups where we aren't bound to that one central chain which pulls everyone together, because that's both a political factor but also a spiritual factor as well.
Yeah, one of the things that set me on the path of critiquing Christianity and re-examining it was realizing that it is a vector for globalism, and it has been, and it currently is, and as it takes a new shape going forward, it will continue to do so. And as Christianity declines in the West, and it's even starting to decline in Latin America, this is of massive importance because we can see already the disastrous effects of a people that is untethered and reduced to nihilism and materialism. And as that continues, and as Christianity, mainstream Christianity becomes more and more paused and distasteful, and it morphs into this universal faith. We can already see that there's been various summits and conferences. Even Jordan Peterson, the very slimy, subversive Jordan Peterson, is trying to do this sort of thing where, basically Abrahamists of the world unite. And this is even in prophecies, the Judaic prophecies, that there will be this one world religion, and it will all be the people of the book, etc., etc. And I think that this is a massive issue because when or if we become untethered even from Christianity, once we lose Christianity, let's use that word, it will be, I think, of consequences so grave we can't even fathom them, because we've also lost what we had before it. So where will the European spirit be if we've lost both? And the only alternative is this global sort of, basically paused gay husk caricature even of Christianity. Like the other day I saw like one of the most disgustingly gay people on social media, and on their profile they're also posting Bible verses and saying, "Oh, thanks be to God he's brought me this far." And it's like, you are a degenerate. How on earth do you think that this is that you are a part of the Christian church, and in what way? But as that continues, I think it's just going to be a really quite a disaster for Europeans to be bereft of their Christian tradition, as as the West becomes more atheistic, and then also having lost what we had before, and the untethering of those traditions. Nix, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's there's actually a debate raging in the chat. I don't know if you guys can see it, but someone pointed out that the universalism of the Christian faith did not come from its Jewish roots or from its Germanizations, but it came from Platonism, and before that, it existed in Hellenic philosophy. And of course, in the ancient city, Numa Denis Fustel de Coulanges points out that first the myth of Pan-Hellenic Zeus, and in Rome, so this is in Greece, in Rome, the myth, the organized, centralized religion, which expanded to first include the plebeians, and then the Latins, and then the peregrines, then all of the inhabitants of Italy, and finally all the inhabitants of the empire, so hollowed out the familial and city-based, tribe-based nature of religion that fundamentally nobody really ultimately believed in Zeus or Jupiter or whatever, or even Sol Invictus anymore. And the empire was prepared for takeover by Christianity. And people criticize Christianity. They say, "Oh, Jewish roots, Jewish this, Jewish that." And I said, if only we could have imported the high in-group preference from Judaism, like this whole thing of, I'm going to prefer a white criminal to a black genius thing, right? Which the Jews have. They harbor Israeli, Jewish criminals in Israel, even though they're like some of the most disgusting, vile people on this planet, right? And it just boggles the mind. And something that one hobby horse I've been whipping for a very long time is that people should read Individualism and the Western Liberal Tradition by Dr. Kevin MacDonald. And the fact of the matter is, we may have to accept that Europeans have probably the lowest rates of ethnocentrism on this planet, that we cannot realistically change that without, how do I put this, centuries of selective breeding until we turn into something resembling Arabs or Jews, right? Which I don't think we should do, all right? So something we have to contend with is universalism may be baked into us, at least at the theoretical level. It could be possible. I'm not saying it is like this, but it could be possible that Europeans will, for the most part, reject any ideology which is not at least theoretically universal. Now, in practice, it could be very exclusive. And I point out that the most universalist religion / ideology on this planet is probably Western style liberalism, libtardism, but it has been, as has been pointed out ad nauseum by the conservative movement, Libtards live in lily white neighborhoods. They talk like MLK and live like KKK. So their revealed preference is for, white people, being around white people, and token, educated, castrated, you could almost say, non-whites. And yeah, that's something to consider. Universalism may be baked into us if it stretches all the way back to Hellenic philosophy, which I think it does. My reading of Plato and Aristotle is that they're not only universalists, that they also reject out of hand non-universalizable philosophies. And we can talk, and we see it in our own revealed preference as nationalists. You were talking about the nature of early Christian communities, right? I don't know about you guys, but I have lost kin. I've been disavowed by kin. I've disassociated from kin for this cause. Whereas, I consider all of you. Is brother a very strong term? I don't think it is. I implicitly trust people who are nationalists, who have proven themselves loyal to the cause. Now, I may only trust white people, but that is still a more universalist position than trusting. Like, I would rather hang out with you guys than my libtarded cousins, even though my libtarded cousins are my kin. So in our revealed preferences, in our behaviors as white nationalists or just European nationalists or just whatever the fuck we are, we reveal a preference for more universalist behavior than maybe we ought to, as opposed to what we're saying. Now, we may be willing to stop the universalizing behavior at the border of race. We're going to hang out with white people who are not kin, but not with non-whites who are not kin. We're willing to exclude them. But still, this community of ours is built around an idea, the idea that kin matters and is, primary, but it's still an idea. We're not, none of us are related to each other. And that's my caveat for this thing. As for, being Christian, someone in my chat said, oh, you're Orthodox, so you're basically pagan. You have a national church, you have national saints, which we do, all over the Orthodox world, and Orthodox practices differ wildly from country to country. Like, one of the weirdest experiences, like in my religious life, was going to a church with friends from Serbia, and even though Macedonia and Serbia are right next to each other, just how differently they behaved during the ceremony. It was so, yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Universalism may be baked into us.
Yeah,
The chat is. Oh, you go ahead.
The chat's exploding, but this is why I knew it'd be spicy. So let's talk about it. I don't mind, but I think to be more precise, I think you said universalist religion, but I think we all know what you're talking about, and especially when it comes to our thing, and when it comes to where you stand on issues. There are lots of people on our side who want Christian nationalism. They want a Christian revival. They want this thing called muscular Christianity. I personally think that Christian nationalism is a contradiction in terms. And even the man who literally wrote the book on Christian nationalism, Torba, wrote a passage in his book on Christian nationalism saying that it's for everyone. It makes no exclusions and no exceptions based on race or ethnicity. Now, I'm sorry, but for me, I think that is not at all what I'm interested in. We need to have some fucking exclusivity and exceptions based on race and ethnicity in our countries now. It's paramount that we start having these exclusions and exceptions. And so Christian nationalism doesn't serve my purpose, and it has nothing that I want in common. And I think that's what the meat of this topic is that if I am, am I a fellow traveler with someone who is like E. Michael Jones. Okay, they're based on the JQ. They can't stand all the pause and degeneracy. Neither can I. All right, okay. But at the end of the day, their primary consideration, their primary objective, is that the Jays simply recognize Christ as the Messiah, the Messiah. And, in E. Michael Jones' case, he believes that the solution for the declining birth rate of Japan is to ship in a bunch of Filipinos and convert them to Catholicism, thereby destroying Japan both culturally and demographically. So we are not on the same side, because I view demographics as really important. I don't think that replacing Japanese people with Filipinos and converting them to Catholicism is a very good way of saving Japan, because it wouldn't be Japanese. But E. Michael Jones doesn't seem to value that very much in comparison to how much he values Catholicism. So, these staking out your position and saying what you stand for, I think at some point, the Christians and people like me, well, we have to part ways at that fork in the road. Or, and this is what I've been trying to find a solution to, I've been wrestling with this, there has to be some way for Christians in our thing, and European Christians, to find a way to reconcile the openness of Christianity, the universalism of Christianity. It is for everyone. And a Nigerian Christian is just as much your brother in Christ as your European folk. How to reconcile that with the obvious need for ethnocentrism and exclusivity that we have nowadays, that we have this need. We need to be more ethnocentric. We need to have, as I was saying in the chat, and I think as you mentioned earlier, Tyr, the ethnocentrism that the Jays have. We could learn from that. We could do with a little bit of that. How to reconcile that with a religion that is for everyone, and that says that you are a flock. You're a part of a flock, and all the believers are fellow members of this flock. It's a very important issue, and we can see even in the chat that it's provoked quite a discussion. And I would just say, arguing in bad faith is never going to be effective. So if you say to a pagan, you worship a tree, I mean, the obvious retort is going to be, well, you worship a dead Jew. I mean, these are not good faith comments. These are not good faith arguments, and it's not going to produce anything worthwhile. And again, if you say, well, you believe in elves, or you believe in Woden? Well, the obvious response is, well, so you believe in the resurrection. You believe that you're literally consuming the body and blood of Jesus Christ at communion. These are not useful things to say. What we're trying to do is find a way in which the Christian tradition, which is of course a part of Europe, can be useful in protecting us from the effects of globalism, of which I think Christianity is a vector, and the effects of mass immigration from people who are sometimes coming as Christians. It's not always, Muslims. There are plenty of Africans coming into Europe who are Christian, but I still don't want that, because they are not European and they don't belong here. So who'd like to jump in?
Can I address, I want to address a comment that was made by Mark Halford. He said that spitting on 1,500 plus years of your heritage to own the libs. That was his comment. And I want to pose this other question. So spitting on thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, depending on, your biblical interpretation, but thousands and thousands of years of your ancestors in order to create this muscular Christianity, that's better. Like, you're looking at the more recent past and saying, "Oh, we're spitting on our ancestors." And the reality is that people that lean, like myself, I would say I'm adjacent to the pagan ideology. Um, I don't look at my Christian heritage and spit on it. Far from that. I look at it and go, it was a vehicle of that time and it existed for that time, but it is not the vehicle that is going to get us any further. Now, on the other hand, Nix is saying he's been rejected by family members. And I want to say my religious sect I came from was pacifist. So when I enlisted in the military, I was rejected by my family. I had my own uncle stare at me in my eyes and say, "You are a waste of oxygen." My grandfather stopped speaking to me for a long time. So I know what it feels like to be rejected because of decisions you make, because you feel you're doing the right thing. Now, I don't think I was doing the right thing, but that doesn't matter at this point. What matters is that it doesn't matter if you're Christian or if you're nationalist, there are going to be people that are against what you believe. And that's just goes parcel and part and territory of being a human being. There are going to be confrontations. But the idea that, to me, that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ, the Jew, is Lord of all. To me, it's the fulfillment of a Jewish prophecy, of a Jewish history, of a Jewish origin story, and I don't identify with that. It's not the vehicle that is going to help us focus on our ethnicity, on our culture, on our heritage. We have a very rich heritage here in Switzerland. Christianity wasn't a thing until the 1700s. The Irish
Yeah,
monks had to
there's parts of
come
Europe
here.
that didn't get converted until, the
Massive.
15th century.
And we still practice tons of pagan rituals that predate Christianity, Fasnacht being one of them. We have Morgenstreich. We have all of these events we have to do. There's a lantern festival that we have in the fall, starting with winter. We have all of these things that are so clearly pagan, have nothing to do with Christianity. Everyone knows that they're older than that. And these things
Mhm.
have continued and will continue into the future. I thought it was going to get destroyed by COVID because a lot of them got canceled and they came
Mm.
back and they came back with a vengeance. People are into it and they want this culture and this identity to continue. And you can see that in the way that people in Switzerland specifically are mass leaving churches. Churches are dying. Our tax dollars go to fund churches in order to keep churches alive because no one goes there. The people that
Mm.
do go there are dying. And yet, any of these pagan traditions or rituals or events that we have, you will have floods of people. There's a wicker man that is burnt in Zurich. So a big effigy of a man made out of wicker wood is set up and burnt in Zurich. And that's a big event. And they all go there and they all basically dance around it and drink. And that is a very pagan ritual. So I've seen it and I've been a part of it and I've gone, okay, this is something that people get excited about. They feel connected to, they connect with other people. It's a net benefit. I mean, there's a joke here in my region that Fasnacht is the season that every woman gets pregnant. If you're like me, I'm pro pregnancy,
Mm.
right? Oh, well, they met during Fasnacht and she got pregnant and now they're married and they live happily ever after. And we all know marriage is hard, but the fact of the matter is that's a joke. That's a running stereotype that couples meet up during Fasnacht and they build families. So these are all things that to me, I go, hey, this is what we need. When we're talking about North America, I think North America, Canada, the United States, Christianity still has its talons in the culture there because the religious extremists that were not welcome in Europe left and went to North America. My parts of my family being one of those. So the Puritans and the people that were disgusted by the pagan behavior of Europe, they went to North America. And that's why North America is still very, very connected to the
Mhm.
ideology and the identity of Christianity. Whereas in Europe, it's been dying for at least 100 years, possibly longer. And so we've been on a search and a process to rediscover our history and our past, and it's rich and it's wonderful. And there is other solutions outside of a Judeo focused religion. So
Mhm.
just so you guys out there, and I mean, for me, just with how Christianity, even if you look at what scholars agree upon about the timeline of the writing of the Gospels, it begs to it makes you question a lot of things. You start to look at how, okay, so 70 years after the life of Christ, of Mashiach ben Joseph, this rabbi, 70 years after they start writing this, a third of the New Testament is written by one guy named Paul, who before he was Paul, his name was Saul. He had this special magic moment that he suddenly changed as a person. He went from persecuting and imprisoning and beating and torturing people who believed in Mashiach ben Joseph to being an avid supporter and then propagating these ideas in Rome and in Greece and in all over the empire. It's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow. And this is agreed upon by Christian scholars, Christian biblical theologians. So I don't know. You got to look really hard at it. Is it a net positive? Is it a negative? Are there versions of it that are extreme or extreme that are racially focused, like orthodoxy? Yes. And if that's working for you, that's great. But the criticisms of Christianity are valid in the sense that it is very much universalist, in the sense that in the Bible it says things like every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. And it talks very clearly about how Jesus says, I come to bring the sword. I come to turn son against father, daughter against mother. I turn a house against itself. That doesn't sound like something that I want in and around my life or my kids. I don't want an ideology that causes conflict between us. So that's
And
just my
it
take
certainly
on it.
has over the centuries in Europe. I mean, just look at the history of Ireland, for example, the 30 Years' War, and other examples throughout history. I think one criticism would be, oh, you all are just looking at religion as a tool. What about spirituality? What about metaphysics, morals, things like that? And Christianity clearly has all of that. And paganism fails in that regard, and certainly atheism fails in that regard. So I think I could imagine that being a response. But then, we do live in the real world, and we are trying to survive these chaotic times. And it has to be said that there are more Christian Zionists in the world than even there are Jewish Zionists. And some of these Christian Zionists are seated at the controls of some very powerful machines, shall we say. And they have given shelter and a means of thriving to people who don't have our best interests at heart. And especially if we look at things happening in Ukraine and foreign policy of the most powerful country on earth, still, waning perhaps, but still the most powerful country on earth. We have to be realistic and swallow a very uncomfortable pill and realize that Zionism, which is, I think, a huge adversary, malevolent force towards us, has been aided through, I guess, evangelical Christian zealots, but also throughout the history, throughout the centuries. And so, what we get, like I was saying earlier, when you engage with a subversive type, and if you understand things like the Holocaust, if you understand the evils of usury, if you are woke on all those things, if you're red-pilled on all those things, Marxism, Bolshevism, things like that, but you're still in the Judaic framework, the Judaic origins. We can say that Christianity was Europeanized, but the origins remain Judaic, and the eschatology remains Judaic. Just look, this is what I'm talking about with the Russia-Ukraine thing and these powerful people at the controls. Not all of them, but a few of them do believe in end times prophecy, and they want it to happen. And if you read the story, the end times prophecies, we might not be the good guys in that story, and we might not make it out quite as well as they think, because it's not our story. And so when you have all these things, you understand you've got the red pill on usury and Bolshevism and all these things, but you're still waiting for the second coming, and you're still waiting for Armageddon, and you're still in that intra-Judaic conflict, between who is the Messiah and all that. I just feel like it's holding us back. Now, you might say, okay, Christianity has a superior metaphysics, a superior moral system. I think that's debatable, but I can understand that raising your hand in that objection. And I think that if you are a Christian who wants to find spiritual fulfillment or look to Christianity for morals, that's fine. Although I would say you probably don't get your morals from the Old Testament, and if you do, you might want to reconsider. But as far as living in the world that we are in now, in the situation that we are in now, I think you do have to look at the utilitarian aspects of a faith system, of beliefs. And as someone who thinks that right now it's of paramount importance that the European peoples preserve themselves and our cultures and our traditions and our customs, and also as someone who doesn't really like the globalization, homogenization, samification of the world, well, I think there is something to be said for retaining and promoting and exploring our pre-Christian origins and traditions. And I think there's also a lot of spirituality and knowledge and wisdom in them as well that's been lost, destroyed, etc. over time. I'll let Hwitgeard jump back in.
Oh, well, what exactly did you want me to comment on in that point?
No, just whatever. Add your thoughts. I'm just sort of riffing here.
Oh, well, one thing that I've mentioned in the private chat we've got here is I think that a lot of pagan traditions were adapted to Christianity, and that like for example, instead of burning the Wicker Man, as Tia mentioned earlier, a lot of burning the devil, a lot of rites that would be used to banish the devil, but you'd also get a lot of Christian blessings that would be used to sanctify your plot of land and produce fertile soil. And these are very pagan concerns. But they aren't concerned with the afterlife. They aren't concerned with the salvation of the soul. They are essentially readapting the purpose of paganism, which is the god's active involvement in the world and in how the world operates, to a new Christian veneer. And this is very much the case for a lot of medieval Christianity prior to the Reformation and Counter-Reformation. And during that period, it could be quite nationalist. It could be very much involved with a nationalist worldview. And while the scripture doesn't pertain to that, especially with the Protestant obsession with scripture, you essentially have two very much parallel worlds with Christianity. You have the living religion. This is something that I've mentioned before in the past, but you have the living religion, but you have the religion of scripture. And these two worlds can overlap in Christianity, but they can also be quite separate. And I know that Nick's being Orthodox, they not only have a different understanding of the scripture at times, but also they have such a strong emphasis on tradition, on the rituals, on the rites, that is more important than the actual than the scripture itself. It seems that the living faith is a lot more important than the emphasis on the scripture. And I think this is something that Christianity going forward probably needs to do. It needs to de-emphasize its Protestant obsession with scripture. It needs to place more emphasis on its traditions, its customs, and essentially try to put aside that very Jewish framing within its scripture and re-emphasize what it's using the religion for. It needs to regain that medieval understanding that Christianity once had, where God would sanctify their crops, God would sanctify their plot of land. He'd bring a lot of positive positive luck and fate upon the world. He'd give good judgments and good honors. He'd intercede in fertility and things like that. And these are very much not just pagan concerns, but they're biocentric concerns, they're life concerns, and that is very much a nationalist concern at the same time. So I think that Christianity going forward does need to roll back its obsession with scripture and look for a much more. It needs to also push aside that life rejecting eschatological obsession with the afterlife as well. It needs to focus on the world around us as medieval Christianity once did, and in that way, it does have an active role within nationalism. And I think this is an important shift that a lot of Christians are very much not concerned with doing. I think that for them, they're much more concerned with verifying the scripture. They're much more concerned with the eschatology and the end times. And
they're very concerned with morality as well. And I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to Uber Boyo, very good Irish lad who's been diving into this issue. I've known about him for a while, but only recently started getting really into his content. He makes some really good Twitter threads and then usually puts them into video form on his YouTube channel. And he loves Nietzsche. His whole reason for being is to flesh out Nietzsche's ideas. And of course, that leads him to making commentary on Christianity and Nietzsche's views on it. And one of the things that he was analyzing and one of the things he's talking about, he has a very good cause, and he's even spoken with the Golden One. They've had a really good chat. He's been talking to a few more pagans on our side of things. I think he's getting very close to our side of things as far as nationalism goes, if he wasn't already there. Like I said, I'm not entirely familiar with him. But one of the things that he's really interested in is reviving European man, reviving the Übermensch of Europe. And how are we going to do that? Well, he argues, and I think he argues with reason, that the Christian idea, that the muscular Christian types, is to reimpose Christian morality on this immoral age and these immoral people. Whereas the Nietzschean perspective and the pagan perspective would be to say that no, it's a question of vital energy. The problem right now is a lack of vital energy. And that's why we're having conversations like this about what are things that we can do? What are things that we can do to improve our situation, improve our lot in life, improve as people, and become Übermensch? Because if you have a society that is entirely lacking in this vitalistic energy, it's complacent, it's regressing, it's evolving but backwards, right? It's languishing in decadence and decay. It doesn't matter what moral system you impose on that. The end result will still be decay because the energy is negative. It's bleak. It's been sapped of its vitality. And I don't know. I just found that very, very interesting. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, panel.
Yeah, it definitely needs
Hey,
to be vitalism. But yeah, I definitely want to hear what Nick has to say on this.
right. So that's actually a very good framing of the thing, because uh, how do I put this? Like, people are talking about, oh, religion is a spiritual and moral thing, not a material thing.
Fjolnir,
But
I'm just gonna ban you if you keep making comments like this. Like, what's the point, man? You're offering nothing useful.
right, sorry,
But
what happened?
anyways,
My headphones slipped off for a second. Anyway, are we still on?
we are still on.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, I think that because I read, well, it could be almost a year now, but I read Mircea Eliade's Sacred and the Profane, and one thing I realized from reading that book is that our idea of what a religion is has been seriously warped, not only by our experience, civilizational experience with the Christian faith, but also by the long period of secular life, and the fact that we have not yet accepted that religion is more something you do more than you believe. So in this sense, I always try to get people, there are very few Christians or Muslims or even pagans in this world, but there are a lot of liberals, there are a lot of conservatives, there are some libertarians and Marxists, and there's a sliver of nationalists. Because I think that the revealed religion, as opposed to the professed religion of people, is that set of beliefs, practices, and tradition, emphasis on practices and tradition, which orders their life both internally, like why do you get up in the morning? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? Why not just curl up into a ball and die? You know, that is your religion. What governs the institutions by which you live your life? What governs your relation to labor? What governs your relation to the center of the world? Where do you locate the center of the world? You know, axis mundi. Where do you locate the temporal center of the world? So which is sacred time, which is profane time? What, if you can answer those questions, what constitutes what constituted the institutions which govern your life? So what constituted your marriage, your relationship with your father, your mother, if you have children, you know, your relationship with your children? What constituted your role in the community? What constituted your property? Right, these are all institutions of life. And you know, us lawyers, we treat like these things like marriage, property, inheritance, we call them institutions. Someone has to institute them, and in the ultimate sense, right, Eliade says the gods instituted all of these things: work, marriage, trade, family, fatherhood, yada yada yada. I think that a lot of people profess a certain religion but are in practice of a different religions. So I profess Orthodox Christianity, or you know, I, I've been conflicted for the past year, but my actual religion, which you can follow through my behavior, my revealed preferences, is nationalism. There's no two ways about it. Which is the sacred time? Which is the profane time? When I think about, oh, times were better in X period of time, let me say it's not the period where Jesus was around in Judea. You know, it's a different period, more recent. That's really, I'm just going to put that in everyone's head. We need to think about what things are, not just what we call them. We call Christianity a religion. At one point, it was a religion, a majority religion for Europeans, but right now, even the Europeans who are superficially Christian, right? They go to churches, they take part in these rituals. their actual revealed religion, which you can deign by observing their behavior rather than by listening to what they have to say. And this is, good general advice for dealing with human beings. Observe what they do rather than listen to what they say. Although you should also listen to what they say, because they're going to tell you some pretty amazing things, revealing things.
Mhm.
But if you observe Europeans, they reveal through their behavior something completely different. And you need this proper framework to really think about religion as something that you do rather than something that you believe. So you ask yourself, what do these people do? If you can answer that question, you'll know their religion. And that's, I guess, my non-answer to this whole question of, what religion should we have? No, we already have religion, right? We
Mhm.
just our thinking on that subject has been so muddled that we might have to actually put on our big boy pants and think through what is our actual revealed religion. And for myself, I am now prepared to say that my religion is nationalism, right?
And
And
I
it
would say
sounds
too that I'm not trying
counterintuitive.
to
Hmm?
say what religion should we have. I don't even like using the verb "have" with a religion, and I'm certainly not trying to convince Christians to give up their Christianity. I'm saying, how should we live? How should we live, and what decisions should we be making about the stakes that we are, involved with here, and what should be guiding our decisions? I don't agree with E. Michael Jones saying that the solution to a country's low birth rate is to just import foreigners, but as long as you convert them, I don't know, forcibly or what, to Catholicism, well, there you go. There's your solution to your country's low birth rate. I
Well,
don't
you
agree with that.
you can import people who are already Catholics, like flood Japan with Filipinos, America with Mexicans, and in Europe, well, I guess we'll have to make do with.
What?
Are there
No,
any Catholic non-whites near Europe
uh,
aside from the Italians?
I think a
I
few
just
French
seen. I didn't know that there was apparently there's a movie made about the Mario and Luigi, and I didn't know this, but I've seen that everyone was very happy that to see, and I was seeing comments like, "It's so great. This just proves that a film with two white heterosexual males, it can be successful. It's still the secret to success." And I was just pleased to observe that. I guess Italians are white. um,
Yeah.
but
And I don't know. It's like it's a hilarious meme sometimes, like to say that, well, how can you say Hitler was racist when his best friends were the black
yeah,
Mussolini
yeah,
and Asian Tojo? But
yeah. Well, everyone knows the very famous interracial marriage between Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe. I mean, who could forget what a historic interracial marriage that was, right?
right,
I mean,
we
if
remember.
Italians aren't white. But yeah, I think and also another thing too about
Did you
this whole.
know that America was discovered by a black man,
Well,
Christopher Columbus?
did you know that Cleopatra was apparently black too?
Yeah, pure. Right.
Just one
Well,
thing I
but if
wanted to say
Italians
about.
are black, then America was discovered by a black man.
Well, exactly,
Checkmate,
exactly.
racists.
um, I would just say to sort of finalize this part of the conversation that a lot of the debate between Christianity and the pagans, which I was pleasantly surprised to discover how that there's this pagan side of nationalism. I was not aware of it until only a handful of years ago, and I think it's a very interesting side, a very interesting sphere in the sphere, of nationalism and dissidence. But the debate is largely online. Again, going back to what you do and how you live, I think that most of us would prefer to be amongst ourselves, fellow Europeans, brethren, and not live in multiracial or multi-ethnic societies, even if the religion was uniform. So I think, again, part of this is getting outside of the the technological matrix that we were talking about earlier and actually just living life. I mean, I'm not sure, but this I don't want to speak for Christians, and sometimes I have seen Christians give some very, disappointing responses to this. But would you rather live in a society with, pretty, I would say, not knowing the guy personally, but he comes across as a pretty honorable, decent, pagan, like Marcus Fullen, the Golden One, or would you rather live with a bunch of, African or Latino Christians in your society? I think when we live out our preferences, as you're talking about, Nix, I think the decision becomes quite obvious. So I think a lot of this, debate and arguing is just because we're online and we're intellectual types that like to do these sort of, debates and things like that. But in real life, it's an entirely different situation. As the Woodlander says right here, funnily enough, when we meet in real life, religion isn't an issue. Unfortunately, I have not met many of the fine folks that I interact with in this community online. I haven't met them in real life, but I imagine that there wouldn't be much of an issue if it was revealed that, I'm not a diehard Christian nationalist. I don't think that would be a problem in real life. Okay, we're approaching 3 hours. Let me just check on chats and see if everything's going okay over on Odyssey. Blah blah blah. Dino Legovic has been making some good comments over on Odyssey, and he also gave a donation to the Entropy. So thank you for that, Dino Legovic. Where was the comment of yours that I saw earlier? I think I might have passed it. Anyway, guys, I'll throw it to you. How long do you want to keep going? Is there anything else you want to talk about? Do you want to throw it open to questions from the chat?
Well, I just wanted to add that before the Black Christopher Columbus, it was actually discovered by a Black Viking named Eric Jackson.
And
Yeah,
Tom
didn't know
Sievers here
that.
saying, today I learned that patties like me ain't white. Dr. Peterson told me. Yes, for those of you who might not know, Jordan Peterson doubled down on his claim that Humza Yousaf, the Pakistani First Minister, the proud Pakistani First Minister of Scotland, who also angrily decried the preponderance of white politicians in Scotland. Well, Jordan Peterson doubled down on his claim that Humza Yousaf is white himself. And in fact, how could you distinguish him otherwise? Because the Irish weren't white at a time either. And he said that in response, while quote tweeting, a very good video by Lana from Red Ice, which totally dismantled his claims and exposed the absurdity of his question. How was Humza not white? So maybe he should have watched the video instead of just retweeting it. He might have learned something, and he might have avoided making such a fool of himself. But he seems to be doing that a lot lately. And again, if the Irish aren't white, then what was all these? Was America like having all these interracial marriages or something, and interracial schools when the Irish came over at a time when America was still for whites only? So yeah, it's just very, very silly stuff from Dr. Peterson. Okay, so guys, what do you feel like? Going for a bit more, talking about another one of Tier's fundaments, or should we throw it up into some questions? We've been going for 3 hours, so that's quite a lot.
I'd say we should respond to questions. It's getting quite late here, so we should do the questions and then round it off after that.
Yeah, I agree with Hwitgeard. I think, and Tier can respond to this if he thinks I'm wrong, but I think we actually went through all of the, you could say, catches of the proposed manifesto, which could be debated right now. Other things, they're going to have to be debated in the future. But for the limited extent we prescribed in the beginning of this show, I think we actually exhausted it. Tyr, do you agree with me?
Yeah, we got through the meat and potatoes of all of that.
Okay, well then in that case, let's go for a few more minutes. You can send super chats to the entropy, which I'll link to again, if you are so inclined to do so. Again, like we were saying earlier, every little bit counts, makes it worthwhile, it makes it easier to keep things like this going. So here's the link in the YouTube, and now it's on the screen. It's also been shared over on Odyssey. And of course, you can just send in your questions on either platform where you are watching. The Woodlander says that JP is too busy kissing Israeli ass to take notice of anything else. Yeah, indeed. And this is also something I saw other people saying on Twitter in response to Jordan was, did you ask Netanyahu, in what way is he Israeli? Did you put his identity in doubt? Strangely that he never does that. It's like he only exists to basically give, generic conservative takes on clown world. And then his other fundamental purpose is to prevent any sort of white unity, white racial in-group preference, or even just awareness, or even ethnic at this point. I mean, he's even basically saying that a Pakistani man is not just white, but even Scottish, as people were saying in response to him saying, "Oh, doctor, if I may, he is perhaps not white, but he is certainly Scottish, as he was born in Glasgow." Just unbelievable. So the whole purpose of Jordan Peterson seems to be that now, and particularly ever since he linked arms with Shapiro and co. Finn Wraith makes a good point as well, that some of the founders of America were Irish. Exactly. I think even 7 of the signatories of the Declaration of Independence were Irish. So it doesn't square with the narrative of them not being considered white. Although again, I always say that term white, it has a lot of pitfalls inherent with it. I prefer to use European, and then I'll use white in a sort of North American context where it's a bit more useful as shorthand. But you do get these kind of things where, because of the use of the word white, Jordan Peterson can play hatchling and say, well, how is Humsa not white? But if you're more specific and you say Scottish, well, then there is no room for such hatchling behavior. Humsa Yousaf is clearly not Scottish. And what matters in Scotland is that Scotland is for the Scots. And the trouble with Scotland is that there's too many.
I'm gonna disagree there, because Hamza Yousaf is obviously not white either.
Of course,
you could ask this question about, are they white, about some of the borderland people. You ask the question about maybe the Turks, the Lebanese, these people, and individuals of those nations, I would say, are white individuals. Aren't some, but most aren't, right?
Don't get me wrong. But Jordan Peterson's behavior is ridiculous, whether or not he's saying Humza Yousaf is clearly Scottish or white or whatever. Whatever tack he's taking, he's being ridiculous.
Right. My point is that the term white is not useless. It actually describes, it's a good enough term to describe the broadest meaningful kinship group of human beings, right? We are white, we are a race, a specific race. There are other races. We call them by this shorthand referring to skin color, even though race is a lot more than skin color, right? And it's a whole thing.
That's why I find it to be a term that's a bit lacking, because I am quite fed up with people thinking that racial differences don't go anywhere beyond skin color. I'm tired of seeing this from the shitlibs. I'm tired of seeing it from the conservatives, especially from the conservatives. So that's why I'm just, I'm quite fed up with this term, and I really don't use it unless I'm specifically talking about North American demography because it's an easier shorthand. But the use of the word white plays into this notion that racial differences only are cosmetic, and it's just so much more than that. Which is why I prefer to use the term European, or even better, the specific European nation that is being discussed or that's being threatened or what have you. Because it's just every day that you see people saying, like, for example, the recent Netflix documentary, which is depicting Cleopatra as a sub-Saharan African, being played by a black woman with an English accent, but produced by Jada Pinkett Smith, and basically just promoting, Black American Hotep nationalism theories about the Egyptians. And to anyone who objected at this blatant lie and clearly driven, agenda-driven lie, so often the response to those objections was, well, what difference does it make what color she is? Who cares about skin color as long as she's a good actress? And we see this time and time again with the race swapping and the white erasure all over. Well, what difference does it matter? It's just skin color. But when you start being more precise, well, no, it's what difference does it make that Ariel, for example, is played by a black actress? Well, because the story of The Little Mermaid comes from a Danish writer. It's a Danish story. It's a European story for European peoples. That if you want to enjoy it is fine, but to swap out the race of the principal character to appease modern audiences or reflect American diversity or whatever reason, well, it's clearly important. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. And it's clearly more important than just skin color. Don't all jump in at once.
Well, I'd be a hypocrite with Hwitgeard in my name to speak against the concept of white, but I also generally use the term European because that's how I see myself and see the world. And when people say, when I reduce it down to mere skin color, it kind of puts you onto the defensive in terms of having to say, is that what you think that race is, you retard? And then you have to essentially go on the attack against them to clear some common ground. And if it feels like you have to reassert the stance of defining race in order to actually make any particular arguments, and by that point, the steam has already been lost. So I think it's more important not to fuel the idea that race is reducible to skin color only.
Tyr, you've been quiet for a while. What are your thoughts?
I just really like the comment of if the Pakistani can be Scottish, then Elon Musk is a Zulu.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic comment, because and this can even be tied into like Christianity. When you look at the differences of like Nigerian Christians and their civilization, it hasn't really made leaps and bounds forward in the same way that Europeans made leaps and bounds forward with Christianity. So it's always the genetic expression. And this goes to also anybody who does anything with animal husbandry. If you have a sheep that behaves really well, most likely that's the lamb that you're going to keep. And if you have a lamb that's a pain in the ass that always finds a way out, no matter what you do with the fence, you're going to be more willing to sell the lamb or slaughter the lamb that gets out all the time. And you're going to second guess breeding the mother that created that offspring next time. You might call her or get another one.
It also ties in with the illegitimacy of our nation states. This is something that you and I, Tyr, have talked about is that once we decoupled citizenship from blood, once living in a country for say 6 years was enough to fulfill the prerequisite of getting a passport or citizenship, and then that can be bequeathed to the children that you have because now you are a citizen. Once that happened, even though most European countries do not have a jus solis system like America, the fact that someone could still live in a European country for X amount of years, get citizenship, and then pass that on, well, it actually served to create this illegitimacy that we've been talking about tonight, because it has created this confusion. Oh, well, he was born in Scotland, or oh, I've got a passport with a harp on it, so I'm just as Irish as the natives, or he's just as Scottish as anyone else, blah, 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 because he was born here or because he's got citizenship. To the point now where people are even saying, I've had a lot of fun with people on Twitter, because if you ask them to take a position, their line of thinking only allows them to take one line, which is that, yes, a man like Jared Taylor, born in Japan, he's Japanese. Someone even today on Jordan Peterson's tweet said, well, why isn't Humza Yousaf Scottish? If Jordan Peterson moved to Pakistan, became a Pakistani citizen, and had kids in Pakistan, both he and his offspring would be Pakistani. Because to their mind, it's just the piece of paper that matters. It's just being born between the arbitrary lines on the map.
I've had face-to-face interactions with people on this where they've said, "Oh, why are you making it such a big deal?" For example, a Turkish man who has a passport here in Switzerland, and I say, "Yeah, but he's not Swiss." And well, he speaks perfect Swiss German, the dialect of the region, and he grew up here and he has a Swiss passport. He's Swiss. And then I look at them and I say, "But am I Swiss? I have a Swiss passport." And that's when it's a slap in their face, because they go, "No, you're not Swiss." But because I don't speak dialect, I speak High German, right? And so they're right there, you're able to literally put it right in their face. What is Swiss? And what are you defining it? And why is he permitted to be Swiss? Because it makes you feel good. But I am rejected because, well, you can reject a white man. Like it's very fascinating. Once, especially, and you can see the cognitive dissonance. You can see it in their head where they're like, "Uh-oh, I've been caught."
Sure. Because ultimately, I don't think these people even believe what they're even saying, because they themselves will end up speaking about blood and soil. Like just recently, Joe Biden was in Ireland talking about, Irish blood, his Irish ancestry. So even the most, shit-libby global homotypes fall back on the norm, which is that your nation is a product of your blood, of your genetic tribe. And so even they realize, I've had this too. I've even said, the people are saying that all these Africans on the Irish football team or something like that, they're just as Irish. They've got Irish passports. They were born in Ireland. And I always say, well, okay, so then all those Irish in America, they don't have Irish passports. Are they not Irish then? Because they don't have the passport. So I guess they're not Irish. And again, the contradictions reveal themselves to the point where I think a lot of these people don't even believe it themselves. They just say it because it's what they've been programmed to think. Nix, I see you want to jump in.
Oh, I was just going to say that this attitude in Europe, you can maintain it. You need a lot of cognitive dissonance to maintain it, right? There's a lot of cognitive dissonance goes into saying that Humza Yousaf is Scottish. However, I will say that there is a problem with proposition nations in the European diaspora. And you could say it about Canada, you could say it about Australia, all these places, but fundamentally we're talking about the USA. So when you ask what is Scottish, the answer is much clearer than what is American, because the European nations have only really recently been subjected to systemic conceptual deconstruction, right?
Mhm.
So I don't think that 10 years ago it would have been controversial to say that that Hamza Yusuf is not a Scot. Whereas it would have been controversial 10 years ago to say that, oh, I don't know, Cenk Uygur is not an American.
Mhm.
It would have actually been
I totally
controversial,
agree.
to say 100 years ago. So
Mhm.
in 1923, that let's, who's a recent Franz Boas is not
Hmm.
American, right? It would have been controversial to say that. It would have been actually very controversial. You have Superman comics from the 40s saying that non-whites are not American is un-American.
Mhm.
This is a problem. This is a
Mhm.
problem specifically for the construction of American nationalism and identitarianism and nationalism in America. Because people are always saying, "Oh, you should reject the idea of being American and just start thinking of yourselves as white." And I say, I don't think that's how things function, because people are both white. This is their racial identity, but they're also of a certain nation, right? They have a national identity. So I'm white and Macedonian. I'm both. It's not an either or thing. And I think that there is such a thing as an American nation, and it is a white
Mhm.
nation, and it has its own specific traditions, which separate it out from the other European nations. And Greg Johnson's actually great on this. He
Mhm.
has a couple of articles upon countercurrents about the specificity of Americans, their separateness
I
from the
just wrote about this
English,
on Substack too, as well. So.
right? A
Mhm.
specificity as in separation from the closest related groups, which are the English, the Canadians, etc., etc., etc. Right? And but because America has been subjected to this conceptual deconstruction so much longer,
And
it's
because it was always
just
a
so
nation
difficult.
of
You need
nations. It's also because it was a nation of nations. There was a
right, and
plurality
of
of
course
nations
this
at the beginning.
conception of America is a lot more recent, because maybe not 100 years ago, but 150 years ago, an American would have probably introduced himself as a Virginian or a
Mhm.
Minnesotan or whatever. People really did identify with their state more than with America, and so American identity really is recent and shallow.
Do you think
How
that's
do
why
we
a lot of the Christian nationalism seems to be coming from America? I've wondered this, that maybe Christian nationalism is a thing that we see coming out of Vincent James and Andrew Torba and Nick Fuentes, Americans, because the normal nationalism, the nation nationalism, ethnic
Mm,
nationalism, it's just too muddled. It's too complicated in America, and
Yeah.
so they have to find something to rely on that isn't pause, degeneracy, multiculturalism, but they can't really touch the ethnic or racial thing because it's just it's too late, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Well, if you remember that 2 years ago, because I've been following him for some time, Nick
Him,
Fuentes,
sorry, who? Fuentes. Okay.
Nick Fuentes and Vincent James, and less so Andrew Torba, but Fuentes and James, they didn't call themselves Christian nationalists. They called themselves America First, right? They are they're American nationalists. It was all about America with them. It's like flags all over the place. And okay, I
Hmm.
get it. You're American. Christian nationalism is more recent. Actually, I think Christian nationalism is a term which originated on the left as a means of describing people like Marjorie Taylor Greene
Hmm.
and the type. And then Torba jumped on it, thinking, "Wow, the enemy has designated me such. It must be a very useful term, right?" Because Andrew Torba logic. Anyways, my point being is I don't think that these people call themselves Christian nationalists because of that. I think it's there is partially like an opportunistic attempt to associate themselves to the populist wing of the Republican Party, right? The edgier MAGA types. And the second reason is I think they're trying to construct a purple pill, right? So a version of dissident politics which steers clear of white identity politics, or at the very least, explicit white identity politics, because implicit white identity politics, they can still function for the time being. So no, I don't think it's related to these shallow roots of the American identity. And another thing, right? But I'm just because it's recent, I don't think it's illegitimate. So I am a supporter of American nationalism, the American nation being understood as the collectivity of white people within the boundaries of the United States, or claiming descent from those. So yeah, although the history of whites in America is a fascinating subject in of itself.
For sure. Okay, gentlemen, I think we'll leave it at that. I'll let you all say your final thoughts, and then we will wrap it up. So, Tyr, since you were the inspiration for tonight's stream, you first.
Well, yeah, I appreciate having this conversation, especially with you guys. I've been following all of you guys for a while, and then started to get more active this year. But yeah, I really appreciate being able to throw ideas around and being able to try and flesh something out, because I think we do need to identify what we're standing for, what we're specifically trying to create, and where we're trying to go with it. So yeah, I really look forward to more conversations with you guys whenever I can. And yeah, it was cool. It was very fun.
Okay, Hwitgeard.
Well, I want to thank Tia for his post that inspired all this. It's very much an important contribution for emphasizing just how it is to have a strong positive vision, and to affirm that positive vision and say, this is what we're for, this is what we see the world as being, but also using that as a means of saying, while we may have several fellow travelers who will be parallel to us in various ways, we need to say that if you aren't on board with this basic standard of what we want, then you aren't with us. And I think that's a very strong and good and assertive position to take. But I also want to thank you for hosting this. I want to thank Nix as well, just for always being so great to talk with, always for taking the lead. I know that I'm quite quiet in these discussions, often listening in the background rather than taking the lead of the talk. So I'm very thankful for Nix for always being a very good and thoughtful speaker. So yeah, thanks everyone. It's been great, and thanks to all the chat as well. Thanks to Angriff as well for being a good sport. So yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, very good. All right, Nix. Yep, always Nix with the Nix has got a very sharp, astute mind, so it's always good to pick his brain and hear his thoughts. So Nix, any final?
I'm just a disciplined thinker, not very smart. There's a difference, actually. Anyways, my point is, right. Well, what am I saying here? I want to thank you guys for a wonderful evening. I think we need more of content like this. I need too many people are out there chasing hot takes. We need to revisit our core knowledge, right? Our core insights, our core positions, right? And we start developing a sort of orthodoxy. Now, we do not, as of yet, have the means to enforce it. That's the thing that everyone thinks about when they say orthodoxy. But it's important that we do have an orthodoxy. This is who we are. This is what we believe. This is what we're trying to achieve. And I want to thank Tyr for making the first move. Like I said, these 7 points, they're not quite a manifesto, but they're a great beginning to one. And somebody had to make the first move in that direction, and it is Tyr, and for that he will be celebrated. We will make a statue of him in the ethno state. If we can find sufficient bronze, because he's such a large man. And I want to thank you, Pox, for organizing this Pox and Friends, so we could have this chinwag. And I want to thank my good friend Hwitgeard for being there, for providing us with his very valuable insights, especially on the subjects of religion and linguistics. Want to thank the entire audience. And yeah, I'm just happy to be part of this.
All right. Well, very good then. Thank you all. Thanks to the chat for being active participants. I wish you all a very good rest of your night or the rest of your afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So we will be back next time with another installment of these panel discussions or one-on-one conversations. We'll catch you all next time. Okay, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.